Good evening and welcome to the December 2nd, 2024 meeting of the City of Summit Zoning Board of Adjustment. My name is Joe Steiner and I chair the board. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In accordance with the New Jersey Statute 10:4-10, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to a newspaper of record and has been posted here in City Hall. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. For the benefit of the interested public, this meeting is being live streamed to the city's YouTube page and is also broadcast on Summit's governmental channel, which is Comcast Channel 34 and Verizon Channel 30. A transcript of this meeting is also being taken using the video and audio. So therefore, we need all speakers to utilize one of the microphones here in the room. Please note that the fire exits are to my right, your left, and at the back of the room where you entered. The city has a listening system to assist the hearing impaired. If anyone needs that hearing assistance, please obtain it here at the dais and return it here thereafter. Secretary Sulios, would you please call the roll of the members?
Sure. Chairman Steiner?
Here.
Vice Chairman Loikitz is excused. Mr. Yuko?
Here.
Mr. Nelson?
Here.
Ms. Zahn?
Here.
Mr. Curran is excused. Mr. Malay?
Here.
Ms. Toth?
Here.
Ms. Chifo?
Here.
Mr. Feskins is excused. Mr. Chanchuli?
Here.
You have a quorum. You may proceed.
Thank you. Tonight, as you can see, our vice chairman is not here, and we have one case where I will not be able to preside over, so I asked Miriam Zahn if she would be willing to be our temporary vice chairman, and we'll look for a motion to appoint her as same.
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Okay, hold on. Chairman Steiner?
Yes.
Mr. Yuko?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Ms. Zahn? Actually, should I not call it? Yeah. Sorry.
You don't have to vote on
Don't
yourself.
answer. Mr. Malay?
Yes.
Ms. Toth?
Yes.
Ms. Chifo?
Yes.
Mr. Chanchuli?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay. Andy Ball is the zoning board's attorney. Mr. Ball advises the board members on matters of law and is the key interface with the applicant's attorney. He does not vote on the applications. Stephanie Sulios, whom you just met, is a city employee and is the zoning board secretary. She works with the applicants on preparing their applications, planning our meeting agendas, and keeping our meeting minutes. She also does not vote on the applications. Also present are our experts who are hired annually by the board to provide input. Tonight we have Marie Raffi from Collier Engineering and Ed Snikes from Burgess Associates, our board planner. These experts are seated to the table to the right of the board, the public's left, and they also do not vote on the applications. Our board consists of 7 regular members and up to 4 alternates. All members can participate in the hearings, but a maximum of 7 can vote. Most applications require a simple majority to be approved, but before we go into executive session and vote on the application, you will be advised how many votes are required in case a supermajority is needed. Each case begins with the applicant's attorney giving us an overview of the application process to date and the variances that are required. We then hear from any additional expert witnesses that the applicant may have to help explain the application and why the variances are needed. The board members may ask questions of the applicant, their attorney, and the expert witnesses. Once the board members and the board professionals have completed their questioning, the public has an opportunity to ask questions. This is not the time to tell us what you think about the case. That opportunity will come at the end of the hearing. Please be careful as to how you phrase those questions. They should not be preceded with a statement about the case, but should be a direct question to the witness. Also, before you ask your questions, please clearly state your name, spell your last name, and provide your address. It is important so that our court reporter is able to keep a clear and accurate public record. After all the witnesses have been heard, members of the audience have that second opportunity to speak. At that time, you may express your opinion, positive or negative, about the application. At that point, then the hearing is closed and we enter into executive session where the board members will discuss the case and vote. You'll be able to listen to and hear our executive session, but you will not normally be able to participate in our discussion. City zoning officer has asked that we remind all the applicants that they must carefully read the resolution that documents the zoning board's decision and to pay particular attention to the conditions contained in it. For example, if there's a landscaping plan required, you must obtain it and submit it to John Linson, the city's forester. If a grading plan is required, you must have one prepared by a civil engineer and submit 3 copies along with the application fee to the city's engineering division. If you fail to satisfy all the conditions in a resolution, that will result in a delay in approving your application, and it will cause extra work for the city zoning staff. The resolutions documenting the board's decision will normally be available 1 month after we decide the case. Now, there is, the first application on the revised agenda is for 27 Edgar, and I need to announce that the notice provided was not, was considered inadequate, and therefore that will be renoticed, and that case will be heard on, I understand, December 16th. So we will move to the second item on the agenda, which is Happy Life Group LLC, 33 Prospect Avenue.
Good evening, Hillary Alls from Dempsey and Sheehan, representing the applicant Happy Life Group LLC, 33 Prospect Hill Avenue, Block 3501, Lot 26 in the R25 zone. Happy Life Group LLC is the real estate holding company formed by Neil Singh, who with his wife and 3 young boys will reside at the subject property. The Singhs took much care to design their forever home within the parameters of the ordinance and for their home to be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood using the design guidelines laid out in the ordinance. During the demolition of the existing structure, the contractors removed boulders and disturbed a portion of property in regulated steep slopes, which were most likely man-made and the result of prior development on site. Although not originally planned, the accidental disturbance of the steep slopes provided an opportunity to enhance the original plan by improving the drainage on site, benefiting surrounding neighbors, proposing additional landscaping, and stabilizing the rear yard with retaining walls, creating a tiered yard similar to the rear yards of surrounding properties. The proposal before the board is for the disturbance of 3,608 square feet of regulated steep slopes where 1,000 square feet is permitted. The proposed plan is designed to meet the intent and purposes of the steep slope ordinance, and the only improvements that are located in the steep slope area are certain portions of the retaining walls, landscaping and grassed areas, and the dry well system. Tonight's presentation will begin with Neil Singh, followed by Rich Keller, the civil engineer, and Brian Hirsch, the landscape architect.
Okay, any questions for the attorney? Seeing none, call your first witness.
Okay, Neil Singh.
And if you could raise your right hand. Yes. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name, spell your last name.
Neil Singh, S-I-N-G-H.
Thank you.
Mr. Singh, are you authorized to speak on behalf of the applicant Happy Life Group LLC?
Yes.
And can you tell the board your relationship to the subject property?
Well, we bought the property in April 2023 with the desire to build our forever home. We are coming from Mendham, New Jersey, which is typically the opposite route to get to Summit. But we have 3 young children, and we're very excited to build our forever home in Summit. We proceeded with demolition in October of '23, and during that process, as Hillary mentioned, was over demoed in the sense that some of the steep slope was disturbed. We immediately were notified by the town for a stop work order, and doing so, we stopped immediately and gave us time to get in touch with engineers and landscape architects and really reassess what we wanted to do with the property along with landscaping and stormwater mitigation. Selfishly, the most important thing for me is a play area for my 3 boys, who are 8, 7, and 3. And I think the plan and drawings that you'll see today, I think, accomplish all of those as far as stormwater and the tier backyard.
Perfect. And have you had an opportunity to speak with your neighbors about the project?
I've briefly spoken to the neighbors on the left and right of our property so far.
And did they have any reaction to your proposal?
No, they were very comfortable with it.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Any questions? Tom?
Yeah, I have one question, and if you want to defer to one of your experts, that's fine. Whenever we get an application like this, which is kind of, oops, we made a mistake, we have to get retroactive permission, it's usually kind of awkward. This, you would think the contractor would know that you're going this far in disturbing steep slope, would have needed permission. And I'm just wondering who, if you want to answer it, fine, if you want to defer to another witness. I'm just wondering how such a large mistake was made before realizing
You know, I
we
think
need
there's.
permission. And then how was the city alerted? How did that come about, that whole?
I don't know actually how the city was alerted, but I would say that just procedurally, you know, I'm a contractor by background, but more commercial industrial, and we took on this project with the intentions of doing it ourselves. And I think that the demo contractor that we hired was unsupervised by us, and I think that was a mistake. And since then, one of the things we've learned is that we have hired a builder, who's here actually tonight, that will be handling and making sure some of these things won't happen again. So that was an oversight and lesson learned, I would say.
So, Ms. Alls, is there someone who can answer how this,
Yes.
I see someone
Mr.
raising
Mr.
hand.
Keller, yeah.
Okay,
Okay, well,
And then Rich will answer that.
okay.
any other questions?
Just the neighbor on the lower end of the property where have you been in touch with that neighbor? Because it's definitely very open to that yard right now, all the.
We, initially, when the stop work order came in, I went down and met with them, and they had actually recently purchased the home from a builder, and so they deferred a lot of things to the builder to kind of touch base with, and I haven't been able to connect with that builder.
I have a question as well. As part of this application, we see a notice of violation, and the city has addressed that. Is this a part of what we are going to approve tonight?
What is that?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay. In the package, we see notice of violation in writing from the city to the applicant.
Right, for the disturbance of the steep
And
slope.
we don't, I haven't seen any written answer to it.
No,
Is there any-
that is not dealt with by the board. That's dealt with by the city through its building department and its code enforcement. But
Thank you.
if,
That answers.
Okay. Well, and the answer is that basically they immediately stopped.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They
And
stopped.
we stopped and
That's-
filed an
If it was
application
anything
for a
that followed
variance.
up, that's between them and the city.
Yeah, I mean, there is no consequence to that. I mean, if there is a violation, there are penalties. There are
But
some
that's not our-
consequences. This is not
that's
our
not
if
us.
they choose to
Has
enforce
nothing
that.
to do
We
with
may
this
be
board.
judicial, but not that part. Okay, do any of our experts have a question?
Not for this witness.
Okay. Any other questions for this witness? Okay, we'll move on.
Okay, I'd like to call Mr. Keller.
If you could raise your right hand, do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name, spell your last name.
Richard Keller, Keller.
Thanks, and I know you've appeared before us a number of times. Any changes to your credentials since the last time you were here?
Nope, except I've gotten a lot more continuing education credits, but no, I'm still licensed as both a professional engineer and planner in the state of New Jersey.
Any questions from the board? Would you like to accept them once again?
We'll accept your credentials and turn you over to your attorney.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, our firm was retained to prepare a site plan of this property. The property is located, as indicated, at 33 Prospect Hill Avenue. Our survey, which is the lead sheet in the package that we're given, is ahead of you. This is no changes to what you have in the package. And you can see the property is actually approximately 43,350 square feet. It's about just under 1 acre. It's located on the south side, so south being to the top of the drawing here of Prospect Hill Avenue, about 242 feet east from Witch Ridge Road. So Witch Ridge Road is to the right of this drawing, kind of tees into Prospect, and Prospect actually wraps around into Lenox and then ultimately hits Springfield Avenue. The property is approximately 176 feet of frontage along Prospect Hill Avenue. It is approximately 225 feet deep. The overall average width, because it does get larger in the back, it is irregularly shaped, is about 250 feet. The property is in the R25 zone where 30,000 square feet is required, so we are an oversized lot at 43,352. The property was, as is shown on the survey on the screen, on our survey, it was developed with a 2.5-story dwelling, driveway, walkways, rear boulder walls around the driveway, an attached garage and other related site improvements. And essentially, just to go back to the original plan, we were disturbing some of the area behind the walls, but there was no intent to disturb as much as they did. There was 2 terraced boulder walls that held up the driveway with about 5 to 6 feet of grade change between them. When those 2 walls were demoed, as well as the driveway and everything else, the site contractor kind of basically pushed soil from those 2 retaining walls back in across the steep slope area, disturbing not fully the full 3,506, not the full 3,608 square feet, but probably 2,900 square feet was disturbed, and most of that was disturbed just by a machine running over it as they spread out. When we did a topo back in that area, the grades were not changed by more than an inch or 2. It's just that they denuded, they pushed soil around and drove the machines up, kind of made it look nice and smooth. That contractor was let go, along with his supervisor, were both let go when we realized that they had were unsupervised and had graded into those areas. But it was as we discussed, it was an opportunity to relook at the property, look at the steep slopes, recognize that the steep slopes do drain directly into the yard behind us, as well as on the existing home. There was no stormwater management, so all of the roof leaders, everything tied into open pipes that then just traveled across the backyard into the neighboring properties that front on the street behind. So it was an opportunity to make lemonade out of lemons, in our opinion, and also more fully flesh out the idea of a pool on this property. Originally, when we talked about doing a pool, we were talking about 2 terraced retaining walls in close proximity. So you'd have a 5 or 5.5 foot wall, 3-4 foot separation on the 5 foot wall. This gave us the opportunity to do something that was really more natural, and also allowed us to create a plateau in that area where that steep slopes is at the back. It was an area where we could flatten out slopes, put stormwater management, put also a cistern in, which all of our roof leaders would be collected in that cistern. I'll get to it in a second, and that would be used for irrigation on the property. So it was supplemental stormwater management. But that's the existing site as it is today. Again, it wasn't the entire site. It was not 3,806 square feet, but it was probably 27. It's clearly in excess of what was permitted by code. Those slopes that exist on the site today If you look at the slope from the steepest, from the longest section across here, that's about 19%, so it's under 20%. And I would point out, I have an exhibit. I find this helpful. I can label it, I guess, A1, and I'll get a digital copy to the, or a paper copy, just so we're clear when we talk about slopes. What I have here, this is a 40-inch board, and what I've done is I've highlighted the slopes on the property. And you can see a 15% slope, it goes 40 inches and out up 6 inches, excuse me. So it's a fairly nominal slope. If we talk about a 20% slope, which is 1 on 5, so you go out, for every 5 feet you go out, you come up 1 foot, that's a 20% slope. And 20% slope, all of our slopes on the site are less than 20%. 25, 33, 33%, this is the slope that Soil Conservation District, which is in charge of ensuring there's no soil erosion and sediment issues on neighboring property. This is the slope that Soil Conservation District says is safe to plant and mow without any additional stabilization. So that's a 33% slope. Obviously, 1-on-1 would be 100% slope, 45-degree with a 100% slope. So the slopes we're talking about, the threshold is the 15, which is the green line. All of our slopes are actually less than 5-on-1. So they're certainly in the lower category. And I'll show you, in a few minutes, I'll show you some information that we think that these slopes are actually not natural. They were artificially created when the sites were developed. If we go to the site plan, we submitted a grading plan. There was some discrepancies between our plan and the landscape plan, and also, as was picked up by your board engineer, we did not count the retaining walls as part of coverage. Many towns that's not counted. Summit it is, and one of my junior engineers was not familiar with it, so we had to add about 500 square feet of coverage to account for the retaining walls, retaining wall at the back of the property and around the pool. And when we did that, we realized that our patios were over, so we reduced them. So I do have an exhibit, which would be my A2. This is the grading, drainage, and erosion control plan. I've dated it with today's date, revised, revision number 4, 12/2/2024, revised per board engineer comments. And we've coordinated this plan with our landscape architect, and you can see that we have both connected the pool patio into the patio that runs under the proposed deck, and we've also removed some of the excess pavement around it. So it's not a full Hampton-style pool, but it is somewhat similar. We've got a 1-foot coping and a 3-foot walk all around the pool, and then we've got a better connectivity between the patio that runs under the deck and then around the pool and connects some of the outdoor openings. So we have revised it so that the plan as proposed is fully compliant with the total lot coverage. In fact, we're under by about 75 square feet. We're completely compliant on building coverage. There's no change to the building. This is the building that was already under construction with permitted, so it's been reviewed by your professionals and building department and zoning officer. So the house is fully compliant in terms of both its coverage and its FAR. And we did make this revision to size down the amount of patio around the pool so that we're fully compliant. Some of the other salient features is the circular driveway, the side-facing driveway on the right. There is, as was indicated, there's about 24 feet of grade change from the front of the property to the back of the property. So we do have the walkout basement with a deck that comes down to the patio. And then what we've done is we've elevated that whole pad section there, and with a wall that gets up to, I think it's mostly about 3 feet high, the wall that's around the pool area. It has a pool code compliant fence around it. And then we drop into the rear yard, which we've created a flat area for our dry wells. And we've collected all the roof leaders come from the entire home, as well as some of the water, I believe, from the driveway is all collected. It's routed into the back, and it runs through into a cistern. And that cistern is a closed tank, and that will hold water. And that is what our landscape architect will use for irrigation of the proposed landscape system. So we're being a little more environmentally appropriate in saving that water for irrigation. We did not calculate any of that 1,700 gallons into our stormwater management, so that's just extra storage that we're providing. And then we provided 2 dry wells at the rear of the site. We will, of course, be required to do permeability testing on the site to make sure these will work. If there's poor perk or there's clay down low, we'll revise that system. We'll provide the same amount of detention as required, maybe longer, more linear, but this whole area allows us to get all the water that comes down, rather than running directly into the backyard, it allows a flat area for us to collect that water into the inlets and then back into the stormwater system that will basically effectively reduce, make sure we're reducing any flows into the neighboring property. Then we'll point out, I'm not sure if it was on purpose, but we did actually oversize those wells. They're about 33% larger than they need to be by your ordinance. I'm not sure why we used a larger number, but when we saw that, we decided to keep that because we thought, again, it provided a little additional factor of safety in those dry wells, which are designed for a 100-year event, and now we've added 33% more capacity, plus another 1,700 gallons capacity in the cistern that precedes those. So clearly, stormwater management was important to us. While we do allow for those slopes, once the water comes onto that plateau and is guided into the stormwater system, we do then go at the 3-to-1, which was the slope that I showed before. We go 3-to-1 into the retaining walls and drop in, but overall net, there's a significant reduction in stormwater runoff into the neighbor behind us as a function of the proposed plan. We also, pursuant to the comments from your township engineer, we're also showing that where that wall does get up to 5 feet tall behind us, we will be putting a black, it's a mesh fence. We do that because it's really a modified deer fence. We're not worried about deer in this case, but our landscape architect has been very successful with black poles, black mesh, 4 feet tall, and what that happens is that will completely blend in and disappear into the landscape, and there's a significant landscape plan for on top of that wall. There's existing forsythia on the bottom of that wall. So there will be significant screening along the top and the ability to landscape along the bottom of that wall, and the amount of runoff that will come will be much less than exists today. I would point out, I'll have my exhibit, I guess this would be A3, and this is an annotated aerial photo of the site. I would point out that in terms of the steep slopes, if we look at Argyle Court is to the south or behind us. If we look at the grade change from Prospect Hill down to Argyle Court, we've got you've got a total of 38 feet of grade change. That's an 8.7% slope. And generally what we find is when we develop, and we used to do we do more multifamily now, but we used to do subdivisions of residential properties like these, you generally find, you try to get the roads to roughly match grade, so you're not cutting and filling too much where the roads go in. And then when you create a building lot, you generally tend to create a flat pad, and you'll cut into the front of it, and then in the back of it, you'll often end up pushing soil and creating a steep slope that mitigates into the next yard, and the people below you will carve out, leave some steep slopes in behind them, and then into the street. So if you look at the grade from Prospect Hill down to Argyle, it's about 8.6%. And we would, certainly based upon my experience, we think that the steep slopes that occur in the blue line on this drawing, those are what was left over from after they put those 2 stone walls in around the driveway. That was areas where there was soil was pushed into those areas. If we look at the overall slope along the left side of the property, so along the left side of the property, we've got a grade change of 24.67 feet across 223 feet of depth. That's 11.1%. Again, so the overall slope from front to back is not higher than the 15%, which is regulated by your ordinance. And then if we look at the center of the site, coming right up the center of the house, we've actually got about 21 feet of grade change. That's 9.5%. So when we look at the surrounding neighborhood, it's our professional opinion that these slopes that were created in the back were not natural. When we're dealing with Mountain Avenue and Oak View, I think it is, some of those areas that sit along the ridge, those are steep slopes, are natural steep slopes. And I think that, similar to areas in northwest Jersey, along the Delaware. Those are areas that we really need to preserve. These areas are not pristine. We think that they're man-made, and we think that actually represents a better planning alternative to make this disturbance. I would talk about the steep slope area requirements in your ordinance. The purpose of the act, the purpose and finding of the fact, is the purpose of the steep slope ordinance is to minimize any adverse impacts caused by development in steep areas, including but not limited to erosion, siltation, flooding, surface water runoff, and pollution of potable water supplies from point and non-point sources. The installation of the retaining wall in the rear yard actually creates a level lawn panel, which will have no negative impact on the surrounding properties. The slopes actually will slow runoff, not increase it. It will reduce the possibility of siltation or erosion, which is what your ordinance seeks to protect. It actually decreases surface water runoff and certainly won't have any impact on flooding. It reduces the possibility of flooding on neighboring properties, and there are no nearby potable water supply sources or streams. So this creates an area to manage stormwater more effectively, currently where there is no stormwater management. And as was indicated by Hillary, it's not uncommon. If we look a few houses further to the left, 3 houses down, you can see in the backyard there's a pool, steps down into a lawn panel, and then there's a retaining wall that further drops. So this is not uncommon certainly in the neighborhood, from Prospect to the lower Argyle Court, to create a series of terraces that control stormwater and create more active play areas. The house immediately to our right also, they've actually, they come down a retaining wall, and then they come down some steps into a lower pool area, and then there's a wall at the back of the property. So this terracing of the properties is not uncommon to the area, and it's typically done to mitigate that grade change, that 38 feet between Argyle and Prospect Hill. I guess what I'll do is quickly I'll run through the engineering memo, and then I'll do sort of my planning proofs, because I'm not going to come back. And try to keep it short, and then we'll have our landscape architect talk about his plans. So with regard to the memorandum from Marie Raffay, that was dated November 8th, 2024. Essentially, we are agreeing to everything, or we've already made those changes. We've already, with regard to 6 is factual, and we've done some slight revisions on that, but all of our numbers are consistent so that we are fully compliant with the 14% coverage. Item number 7, we did not include the modular block walls, which is why we have the revised plan and reduced coverage, so we are fully compliant with the allowable coverage of 30%. As I said, we're about 75 square feet less than permitted. We are, again, the steep slopes that were disturbed wasn't fully the 3806, but they were, and the changes that were made erroneously by the contractor were really, except for right behind the walls, most of them were only a few inches. It was really, your ordinance actually defines disturbance. If I plant a tree in a steep area, that's disturbance. And so the fact that once we ran a machine over those areas, they were technically disturbed. And so while we had a disturbance, it wasn't as though we were trying to create a big flat plateau. As was pointed out by our attorney, the improvements, the pool is completely outside the steep slope area. Some of the retaining walls are in them, but we could pull those retaining walls back, but I don't know to what effect, because I think the benefit of that flat lawn panel is we can more effectively manage stormwater. The retaining wall on site, it was pointed out that we need fall protection for any walls over 4 feet. We need to provide structural calculations. We would do so as a condition of any approval this board might grant. We did show a fence, and it would be that deer-type fence that disappears into the landscape along the retaining walls at the back of the property. And there already is a proposed pool code compliant fence that is integrated into the wall around the pool. The 10, I think we've demonstrated there's actually an improvement to the stormwater management issues. The area between the fence and the retaining walls is going to be lawn at the rear, and then behind us there's an area where there's some existing vegetation. Right now, we can certainly add some forsythia back in there, but there'll be significant landscaping along the top of that wall. The two dry wells, as was indicated, those were over-designed. We have a 6,395 square foot increase, but we designed it as though there were an 8,200 square feet. So effectively, we over-designed it by 33%, as I said. Brian will talk about the landscape plan. The cistern, we've explained, it's worked very successfully on a lot of Brian's projects where it provides for irrigation for the on-site vegetation, which is significant. So it's additional storage, and Brian can talk about how that works if you need any further questions on it. And then with regard to, we're sure number 15, we can get the pipe under the wall. We can provide details to the engineering department. The inlets, I did speak to Ms. Raffay last Friday. We will provide a sump in them or a hood on them to make sure that no debris that gets into those inlets will minimize any debris that gets into those inlets from getting into the stormwater management system. I would point out, I have a dry well in the back of my property in Millburn. It's got an open grate. It's been there since 1977, and there's no such protection, but we've lost about a foot of storage on a 9-foot deep tank. So certainly by adding this kind of sump on the bottom, this thing should maintain its efficacy for 30, 40 years, or longer. We will comply with the sidewalk requirements, driveway requirements itemized in 17 and 18. There is a fence that runs up the existing left side of the property. If we go back to the survey or actually the site plan, you can see there's a fence that actually pops outside. You go around some trees. That is our chain link fence. That encroachment will be removed. So any future fencing will be solely on our property, and we'll remove any encroaching fences. The soil logs obviously are required both by your engineer as well as the city engineer when we submit this to them for a revised grading plan. Remember, we already had a grading permit that was fully approved, but now that we've increased the coverage and we've modified with the walls, we'll provide them with the calculations for the walls, and we'll also provide them with a permeability test. And as indicated, we've done a lot of work in the area. We've gotten pretty decent perk. If we don't get good perk down deep, we'll do something that's long and linear. But I have no doubt that we can do something that will be protective of the neighbors to the degree we've shown. We've actually already met with John Linson a number of times, and we'll meet with John again regarding the proposed plan. I think Brian will go over. We took down 7 trees as part of the original demo permit. We're talking about taking down another total of 8 trees. That are in the construction. Most of the 7 trees we took down originally were either dead, dying, structurally poor, or they were right in the proposed building. And then we have about 8 that are coming down at this point, and we've already met with John Linson. We'll continue to meet with John. I don't think that Brian has had the opportunity to show John the significant planting plan we're proposing, but we'll certainly meet with him as a condition of any approval the board might grant. So I think the rest are all would be conditions of approval if the board were to grant it. So I think we've basically agreed, we've either answered any of the questions or agreed to any of the requests by Ms. Raffay. If I go briefly into the planning proofs, while you could say there's a hardship because we've got some man-made steeps up on the property and it's limiting our ability to develop this property in a manner that's consistent with the rest of the neighborhood and the way you'd expect a 43,000 square foot property to be developed. We see it primarily as a C2 variance. And under C2, that's known as the flexible variance, where the purposes of the Land Use Act are advanced and with the benefits resulting from the deviation outweighing any potential detriment. Again, this is basically where the proposed plan with the variance relief requested represents a better planning alternative than a conforming one. We believe that the purpose of the Land Use Act that are advanced is under 4055D2 is Section A for general welfare. The proposed steep slope will decrease runoff with no adverse impact to the neighbors. It allows for development of the property in a manner that is consistent with the neighborhood. There is no adverse impact on the enjoyment of air, light, and open space to the neighbors. We think that there's only benefit. With regard to the negative criteria is in 2 prongs, that there's no significant detriment to the public good, and there's no substantial impairment to the intent and purpose of your master plan and zoning ordinance. We see that there's no detriment to the public good, only positive. The project does not have any adverse impact on the neighbors to behind or front, actually improves the condition to those behind. Can't be seen from the street at all. It's a very generous landscape plan that will mitigate the views from the neighbors. Again, we believe these slopes are not natural. They are man-made, and we're seeking to come back in and basically further develop what was already disturbed. And in the grand scheme of things, I think that 3806 is only about, it's less than 10% of the total area of the site. Most municipalities have steep slope ordinances. They're a little more generous than yours, and they regularly have between 10 and 15% of the site to be disturbed in terms of steep slope. So it's not inconsistent with the development we see in the area. And again, since they're man-made, we think there's no negative impact. And there's certainly no detriment to the intent and purpose of the master plan. We think that as the site will be consistently developed with those in the neighborhood and one you'd expect to see on a 43,000 square foot property. And I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Anything else from you?
Nope.
Okay, questions? We'll start with our experts. Marie, you're up.
So, so thank you. You went through much of my memo, and I don't know that I really had anything else to say, but I'll just make sure that there's nothing for the landscape architect. I know you talked about some of the maintenance between those rear walls, the lower walls, as you were calling them,
Yep.
and the property line. But when I compare that with what you have on the landscaping plan, I'm not sure how you get back there, because there's some bushes along that property line.
Right, we can get back there. I think that, I'll let Brian answer that,
Okay.
because we talked about that earlier today, and there was it's probably not a good idea to try to maintain those lawn areas, though we can get down there, but probably to plant forsythia, which is what's down there now, as a ground cover, and let that kind of grow up and vegetate, and that will give some blockage to the walls, and then we'll have significant evergreens along the top of that wall.
Okay.
So I can let the landscape architect talk about that more fully.
All right, that's good. And I know you updated your site plan with the pool area and the patio. It doesn't look like, it doesn't match up with what's on the landscape architect plan, so
We-
just want
we-
to make sure.
I was on the phone, but I wasn't at a computer today, so we're trying to get it. But my numbers are correct, and so we'll make sure that if there's still any discrepancies between, and do you have a new plan? Okay, Brian has a new plan. So Brian's
Great.
plan will match mine almost exactly. And the other thing we did is we also did move the pool equipment a little further from the house. It's right in the middle of a landscape area that the architect will show. We nestled it right against the wall. So we'll meet your ordinance requirement to be fully screened, not only from the neighbors, but also from our house as well.
All right, so that's all I have.
Okay.
Chairman?
Please.
Just one question, and this might be a question also for your landscape architect. It has to do with tree preservation. You indicated there'll be 8 trees removed. The one area that I'm looking at is on I guess it's the southeasterly corner or the rear of the property, the back left corner. There are 2 trees to be preserved there, at least that's what seems to be indicated by what I can see on the plan. Yeah, those 2 trees. How far away are the proposed walls in that area?
They are about, from the root mass, from the center of the tree, they're about 7 to 8 feet from the center. So it is tight.
What's the condition of those trees? I'm sorry if I did not review these plans, so therefore I'm just hearing it for the first time tonight. I didn't know if that's something that you took a look at,
Let me see if I can tell you that.
unless your landscape architect knows better.
Do you know what those trees are? Okay, Brian can talk about
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
I'll wait for him to comment on that. That's all I would offer to the board. I know one of the purposes for steep slope disturbance is also to retain trees on the property, so therefore, that might be one area the board looks at.
Unfortunately, there are some trees that have to come down, that they're in the building footprint or in the driveway, and they're very close and they will be damaged. Our client wanted to save as many trees as possible. Unfortunately, not everyone is a good steward of the property, and so there was a lot of deferred maintenance, a lot of structural issues, and by the way, when I said 8 trees, those were 8 trees greater than 10 inches in diameter. There were some 4 and 6 inches as well, but they were relatively minor. But unfortunately, when our landscape architect did an inventory, a lot of those trees were structurally damaged or not cared for, showed root girded roots, a number of issues. So unfortunately, I would fully expect my client will be a better steward of the landscape as we move forward, but many of the trees that were coming down are in poor shape. There is one actually, and what was most important in my meetings with John Linson and my landscape architect's meeting with John Linson was that we preserve the trees at the front of the property. The street trees were preserved. They are 43-inch and a 23-inch trees in the front. Brian can go over the species. I don't have it right in front of me, but that's where we made sure that we are going to preserve those trees. We're guarded on using the existing curb cut for construction entrance, and we will be putting tree protection fences around those trees as shown on the plan. And that was through meetings with John Linson. That's where he really tied himself to those trees and said, I can't let you disturb these trees. And so there are some other trees. There's one or two others that are actually in fairly nice trees, but they do have to come down because they're either in the legal building footprint or close to the house and also in the footprint of the driveway.
Thank you.
Board members? Tom?
Yeah, so my question's about trees as well. I was going to save it for landscape architect, but this witness alluded to it. And I saw you type, Mr. Ball, I saw you typing when I was going to ask the question. Did you add a condition that the forester has to review the revised plans?
It's anticipated, as they've basically offered
Yeah.
it, that the revised plans would be reviewed and approved by the city
Yeah,
forester.
he's asking for something I'm sure I've seen before, a tree removal plan.
Well, that was part of my question, too.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
the entire landscape plan
Yeah.
would be subject to his review and approval.
I've worked with John for more than 30 years now, so we'll certainly get together. My landscape architect also, as has Brian. So one of the benefits of having a forester that works in other towns is we've known him for a long time. We'll certainly, as a condition of any approval, we're happy to meet with him and make sure he's quite comfortable.
Other questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Just to clarify, because we have a new zoning officer, and normally they would put what kind of variances are required, but it doesn't say here that it's a C or a D. You said, I think you said it's like a C2 variance. Is it a C2
No,
variance?
it's a C2 variance.
It is a C2
It's a C2 variance.
variance.
I said there are components of a C1 where there's a hardship created by where they left some artificial slopes, but I see this as a C2 variance.
Okay, because I didn't see like the actual variance in that application
It
or
is
anywhere.
just the steep
It's
slope
only a
variance,
steep
Just,
right?
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so then the black mesh fence that you were talking about, that is by the retaining wall, right?
It'll sit right above the retaining wall,
Okay,
right
so
behind the
above the
retaining wall.
retaining wall, so that is, and there's going to be, on the homeowner's side, there will be trees,
Mhm.
but then the backyard neighbors are going to be seeing this black mesh fence. I know you're saying it's gonna blend, but I think the trees are gonna have to grow quite a bit before it blends unless you're putting in 20-foot arborvitae. So
I
you-
can let the landscape architect talk about the type of trees that he's gonna put in there, but I can say that, having seen that fence installed on no less than 6 or 7 properties, and it's usually 6 feet, but in the 4-foot condition, because your ordinance says that the fence and wall height can't be higher than 10 feet, so we're maintaining that less than 10 feet. But the low vegetation, there's a fair amount of forsythia on the neighbor's property, some is on our property, so I think the landscape architect can talk about how the visibility of that wall will be buffered by both existing landscaping on the neighbor, and then, yeah, we'll have trees that'll go on top of that, and while the fence sits in front of that, I can guarantee you that it's very thin black mesh, and it basically disappears into the landscape, and the landscaping on top will be evergreen.
I guess then maybe it's a question for the landscape architect, because the downhill neighbor, there's really no vegetation there right now. So I don't see any plans for that, so I guess we'll talk about that after. And then, one other question, and I know it's not necessarily related to the variance, but Historic Preservation Committee made a comment about this property. And since you are representing the planner as well, just wondering whether the building plan has been, if you have any plans to bring it in front of the Historic Preservation Committee for review to make sure that they feel like it's in keeping with the neighborhood. Just, they had a pretty strong comment in here about the building that was there before and not having seen the plans. Is there any plan?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that the house that's, when they pulled the building permits, the house that was submitted, those plans, we haven't changed the plans at all. And those were They meet your design guidelines for, amount of roofs that go over a certain pitch and things like that. But I don't, they may not have been shown to HPC, and I don't know if we have any plans to. But the house is actually permitted and under construction, or could be under construction, without the need for variance relief.
Yeah, it just looks like it was maybe missed in making it to the Historic Preservation Committee, because this is a historic district.
They're not
Is it-
obligated
I just didn't, I figure I have to ask the question.
not
since they're-
obligated to send it to the Historic Preservation Committee.
Okay.
Excuse me, other questions?
I have a question. You mentioned that the slope, the steep slope that was disturbed was artificial, that was put there from a previous development. Are you talking about the retaining wall when that was?
No,
Built?
what happens is when you have a property that's sloped at that, at that 15% or something like that, and you want to create a level building pad in the house, and you want a little play area, you carve out an area that's 50, 60, 70 feet at relatively flat, or sometimes it's a high point that pitches back. So when you create that level area, you're filling up soil to create a level pad for your garage, so your garage can get it, so your driveway can meet the garage, and then from there, you have to get back down to natural grade. So what the previous developers of this home did is they put 2 boulder walls in to help mitigate some of that, but they weren't very tall, and then they just sloped down steeply towards the property line. And that's how we got that, in my opinion, that's how we got that area of steep slopes in the back here. So when they created this flat area in the center, this happens all the time. They push soil, they create, and they basically create a flat, and they've got to get back down to grade. So they create something that's steep. Back when the house was developed, there were no steep slope ordinances. So to create something that was 20% was, again, 1 on 5 is not steep by Soil Conservation District standards. It's not steep for backyards. The bigger the backyard, a 20% on a big open backyard almost feels flat, or 15% certainly does. So those areas that were the green areas on the drawing there, those are the areas where we think that they pushed slopes, because as I said, if you draw a line from 2 streets, that's at less than 9%. If you draw a line from the front to the back of the property, we're at 11, 10%. It's only that one section in the back where I think they concentrated some fill and then rolled down to grade, where we got the slopes that are in excess of 15%. They get up to about 19.8%.
You're talking about like 75 years ago. That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. So it's
Yeah.
not when the wall was built, like 75 years ago when the original house was built, that's when.
Yeah,
okay.
when they built the road, when they built Prospect Hill Avenue, is when they first started pushing earth around. And as I said, no one didn't set off any alarm bells back in the day to leave a slope that was 20%, because it's not that steep.
Don?
So the proposed house is permitted, ready to go once this approval's done?
Yep, they were under construction until the contractor drew outside the lines.
So were there any concerns about the water runoff then? Were there any, dry wells put in?
We had retention basins, but they were, and they met the letter of the ordinance, but we weren't creating any flat areas to kind of control water. So we were a little concerned about what happens when those retaining walls fill. How do we get rid of that water? And so this actually solved that problem. We were talking about level spreaders. We were talking about almost creating a retaining wall to distribute water over a larger run. So this actually solved met the ordinance requirements, but we thought it was an improvement on the stormwater management.
So it met the ordinance requirements, but you said you were concerned about it, so why wouldn't there? My question is, as related to my colleague over there, that, once the stop work order was issued, this whole plan came into being, and there was an opportunity to resolve the water runoff prior with the original plan.
Right.
Which didn't seem as high as a concern as it is now, because the end result's gonna be different because they want a different plan.
It was an improvement, but wasn't nearly the improvement we're getting now.
And were you
So-
the engineer for that?
Yeah, it
Or
was,
someone-
my firm was, yep. And so, as I said, the goal, once there was the problem with the stop work order, the schedule just that went on the wayside. I mean, I had a new owner that was anxious to get going. They got their building permits, they were looking to get going. Once that happened, I said, you're not gonna get in before the new year, so let's just take the time and do it right. And so, and it wasn't that the previous plan didn't meet the code. I think this was just an improvement. But we also added more impervious area
Of
too.
course, that's why you have to have more
Yeah.
storage
Yeah,
capacity.
I would have only needed one dry well without the pool.
And where would that have been in the old plan?
We actually would have had it in just to the right of the steep slope area, but in a fair, it was just under 15%.
And that wouldn't have triggered any type of variance, right?
No, we were disturbing about 1,000 square feet at that point. We were just coming into.
So is it safe to say, in your opinion, that really the addition of the pool area is creating this?
Well, the pool is what required the second dry well, but we could have, again, if we had done nested retaining walls, which I hate to do, where you have a 5-foot wall, 3-foot separation, another 5-foot wall, because it doesn't look natural. And, one thing about this area is the slope, they're slopes, they're steep areas. It's like I get this in Short Hills all the time. There's a reason there's the name hill. The name is called Prospect Hill. There are hills in the area, and you want to maintain that character. By the same token, terracing does improve water, and it creates more usable area. So we had that opportunity, and it seemed like a better way to do it. If they had continued under construction, wanted to do a pool, then we would have done a terraced retaining wall, would have been fully conforming, but I think this is a more attractive solution. Or we would have come for a variance, but, I also don't like getting under construction coming for variances. I don't like, I've been pushed back into that area before. I hate doing that. I've been here once before on that. When you think you can do something fully conforming and the client can get under construction, we did that. We designed a plan, it was approved.
So, I don't know, we asked this question earlier, maybe you're not the person to answer it, but what created, we know what created the stop work order? When was that discovered?
I think you gave the time, I don't remember the date.
Well, like what phase? Was it right after demo but before construction?
Oh, yeah,
Correct.
before, they
Yeah.
demoed the house, and they were stabilizing the property to start mobilizing for construction, and that stabilization is when the contractor basically, started running a backhoe all through this area. And as I said, the grades weren't changed much, a few inches here and there, but once you run a backhoe over the property, it's technically considered disturbed, and so, you can't undo it. And so we had to queue up for variance. And I would say, at that point, the schedule went out the window. It takes some time to queue up for a variance. And the contractor was fired, the subcontractor was fired. They retained a new contractor, much bigger operation, to make sure something that doesn't happen again.
Thank you.
Additional questions?
I just have one more. The
Go ahead.
play area that the owner mentioned, is that just a level backyard, or is there a swing set or something
just
that
a
that is
level.
not on the plan? Okay.
Just a level backyard, so over that area where it does double duty, we're slowing down the water, we're creating an area for that water to flow into those dry wells across the backyard. That's an area where you can also throw a ball, you can run around. There's obviously a large area also further to the right in the backyard. So all this area coming across, these are very flat contours that drives the water all the way across into this inlet, back into the dry wells, along with all the rest of the water from the house. So that's the area it's not you can't fit a tennis court back there or even a badminton court, but you can certainly throw a ball back there. But there's no planned swing set at this time, and I'm not sure if swing sets count as coverage, so we're right at, we've only got
Oh,
about 75%.
just a location of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, if it was permitted, I suspect the swing set could go off behind the driveway, behind the house, off in the area where I'm circling now.
It would have to be 15 feet from the property
Yeah.
line.
Yeah, as an active structure, everything has to be 15 feet off. This would be more like 40 to 50 feet off,
But nothing like that is proposed
Nothing
at this
proposed.
time, so we're not considering
Right.
it.
nope.
So is that area where we were just talking about where a swing set
The what
would be
ifs,
allowed
huh?
to go? Yeah. Is that's being regraded as well?
Yeah, that's all being regraded. So this currently, if you look at my cursor, this water is all coming down here at about 12%, coming down towards the neighbor behind. What we're doing is we're pulling these contours, so each one of these dashed lines is an existing 1-foot change of grade, and then the heavy lines are a proposed 1-foot change of grade. So instead of the water coming back this way, at 12%. It's now coming laterally at about 2% across the lawn. Continues at 2% all the way until it's picked up by an inlet. It backs into the dry wells. Again, the rest of the water from all of the roof leaders and the driveway are collected, coming down into the cistern, and from the cistern into the dry well. So all of that is, where I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet of grade change. Now I have 1 foot of grade change, and it's lateral rather than behind. So it's really making sure water doesn't get into the neighbor behind us.
So if I were the neighbor on Argyle Court, and I own that tax lot 14.4, will I be seeing a large retaining wall in my back?
You will be seeing,
Conceivably in my backyard?
a retaining wall that's, 3, 2, that's about 5 feet tall.
And there's no plan for it, I was out of town, so I apologize.
Sure.
Is there any design features for trees back there, or we whole talk about that?
I'll let the landscape architect talk about that.
And then just real quick, can you just, I know cistern, my only experience with a cistern was on Hillside Avenue in Summit when it collapsed. But
would
it was
be-
also like 150 years old.
Yeah, this would be
Can
a,
you explain to us the, like, what's that constructed
it's
out of?
actually a sealed concrete tank, reinforced concrete. So it's not like a dry well where it's open to stone on the outside. It's got a tank, and then there's a pump system that pumps water out. There's generally an ultraviolet light component so that it kills any germs or bacteria that might have been growing in there. And then that's part of the irrigation system. So they use that for all the watering. There's a significant landscape program, so there will be irrigation for that, drip irrigation, as well as some sprinklers on the lawn. So that provides a way of doing that without using public water. So certainly in these days of drought, it's a much preferred way to go. And it provides us an extra 1,700 gallons of stormwater management that otherwise would be in the dry wells.
Anything else from anybody? Let's move on to the landscape.
Okay,
I believe that's who's
yep,
next.
that's it.
Questions from the public?
I'm sorry?
Questions from the public?
I forgot to say questions from the public, and that's why I have an attorney. Thank you. Is there any questions for this witness from the public? Questions only. Thank you. We will now move on.
Brian Hirsch, please.
All right, and when you're ready, if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name, spell your last name.
It's Brian Hirsch, Hirsch.
Thank you, and can you briefly describe your background and experience for the board?
Sure. I graduated from Cornell with a BSLA in 2001. I worked in New York City for Michael Van Valkenburg Associates. We did mostly large public parks like the Brooklyn Bridge Park, the High Line, Teardrop Park, college campuses, that type of work. I worked for a small residential firm in Forest Hills, New Jersey for the next 5 years from 2005 to 2010. I was became a landscape architect in 2005, licensed, and then in New York and New Jersey in 2009. I went on my own in 2010. I've been practicing in the area since then.
And license in New Jersey is in good standing?
Yes.
Any questions from the board, or would you like to accept his credentials?
No questions, so
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So I would like to issue an updated plan that does match with the calculations. So if I can give this to you guys and mark it as an exhibit. I don't know what exhibit we're up to.
A1.
A4, yeah.
A4, okay.
So all that's going getting passed out, just to give you some background, I was hired in April of 2004 of this year, and I made my first site inspection really as the leaves were coming out in May. And we developed the plans that we're looking at between May and August, and we submitted to the town, and we've made obviously some updates based on the responses that we got in November. Most importantly, we had the opportunity to meet with the city forester, John Linson, on site on June 20th, and we reviewed a preliminary version of the plan, talked about the tree removals, talked about the proposed planting plan, and we were there for about an hour, but I think it was a very productive meeting. So, John was very aware, of what we're suggesting on the site and has reviewed both the species that we're suggesting and the overall concept of what we're doing here. So I think, Rich has done a great job of giving you the bone work of the property and explaining what the limitations are of the site. I'm here to kind of fill in the color literally of what we're putting on top of the ground and how we're creating privacy and enclosure, and to explain a little bit in more detail some of the questions that you had for him. So let me just move from front to the back here.
Excuse me, could you just speak a little more directly into the microphone?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the most important things that I noticed right away on visiting this site is that there is a corridor of mature canopy trees, which you can see in the foreground here. This is labeled, there's a red oak, a ginkgo, and other red oak. And one of the things we noticed on the site visit with John Linston is that this is obviously, there's a bump out in the sidewalk here where a street tree used to be on the same cadence and rhythm. And so part of what we're suggesting to go in there is another large mature canopy tree, which will continue that streetscape that's existed for a long time. I think what's important about the planting plan and what we're trying to show with this front facade planting is that there's an expectation when you are driving on this of what a historic canopy tree-lined street looks like. And I think what we're trying to do is continue that same expectation. And so what you see with the plantings that we're showing in the front yard directly to the left and right on the property lines, and the plantings we're doing in the center of the carriage loop driveway, is to continue that evergreen understory flowering minor trees, which we're suggesting to be southern magnolias, and then we're doing Norway spruces to the left and the right. The reason for that is those all grow in the limited light and the shared availability of resources of a large mature canopy and what we have that will be successful underneath it. And so one of the trees that we were talking about removing is this. It's not shown on this plan, but the tree is directly here. And so the reason why we needed to move that tree or remove that tree is that half of the tree mass is actually in where the house is going to be built. And I took notes from our meeting with John Linson, which I'm happy to read to you, but some of the things that were observed, the tree unfortunately has a rather unfortunate architecture where it branches all in one spot up at 30 feet. It has severe canker and fungus. Any more work that we do around the tree is going to certainly push it further into decline. So we could try to keep it, but it was by the suggestion of John Linson that we, let go of that tree now, and it doesn't change the whole front facade of the corridor that we're trying to preserve from the public right-of-way. That's much more from the property itself. So that was the largest tree that we are asking to remove. One of the things that we're trying to do on the courtyard here is to create a more formal courtyard experience on the driveway side. We're actually proposing to do a symmetrical tree planting of European hornbeams around the outside. You guys might have seen that where they have light skin bark. It's a floating tree canopy, and it creates a sense of deciduous enclosure, which is inside of the actual evergreen privacy that we're trying to create between the neighbors to the left and the right. If you look at the plan overall, as a whole, we're basically trying to create a varied evergreen perimeter around the outside. Obviously, a large open lawn area on the inside, and then more privacy on the inside, and again, another smaller terrace on the inside. This is what's used most of the time and viewed from the house. What we found to be successful is when you do a varied evergreen planting around the outside, it doesn't become a monotonous hedge or something that is predictable and just frankly not interesting. So that's what we've done by creating a certain rhythm of plantings as we go around the outside. I think something that I just wanted to bring to the attention of what we're talking about doing with the water mitigation really is that everything that's on this driveway carriage loop to the front door is going to be moving from the house towards the street. which is a good thing because it reduces about a third of the runoff that's moving towards the back of the house. Everything from the side of the house on both sides is obviously still running around the sides of the house. Most of the water on the hardscape is being captured inside of a curbed area and brought into, a drainage system, which is again going in pipes, now no longer across the surface, down and into our rainwater collection here and then into the reservoirs. Likewise, the lawn area is part of the advantage of creating these lawn terraces is that it slows down a stormwater when it's starting to run. Steep slopes, the water starts to group together and creates rivulets, and that's when you get erosion, obviously. All of the contours that we have a slight backward cant to them. What's helpful about that is there's no water that continues to cascade from one terrace down to the next. It keeps it on the terrace itself and redirects it towards where we want it to go. So the actual volume of water that is landing on the wall and running towards the next door property is very minimal. And so you don't get that same speed of the water moving across the site, which you do currently. There were several questions about, kind of the planting and how some of these treatments were handled. So let me just zoom in on the rear wall so we could look at that real quickly. This planting plan, for better or worse, is only a tree planting plan, which we proposed about 145 trees on the property. So when you're looking at these large, circles and masses, these are Norway spruces, as are these, and these are green giant and arborvitae. So obviously from this planting plan, the plantings are favoring the property owner. What you're not really getting a full reckoning of is these areas that are in these lighter and darker greens. The light is the lawn area. These are all planting beds. So what's not indicated are vines, perennials, and shrubs, which are the lower story below. It just, that wasn't part of what we were obligated to show at this point, and it's very, intricate. But basically, if this is the property line, there's the opportunity to put groupings of plantings down here. The existing right now are forsythia, which is a very vigorous deciduous shrub that flowers beautifully yellow in the spring. We're also planning on putting evergreen vines and climbing hydrangea on the wall itself, which grow between 5 to 10 feet a year. So within 2 or 3 seasons, that whole wall should be enveloped in some type of armature. And likewise, you'll have plantings on both sides, both below and above the wall. So it does feel like a natural hedgerow or like a natural, environment. So I think it would be, it's going to be pleasing from both the homeowner side, but then also from the adjacent lots. So I just wanted to look at that real quickly with you. So just for clarity's sake, the original drawings were dated August 29th, which is the submission, and the drawings that we're viewing today are December 2nd. So the areas that have been changed, just to draw attention to them, around the pool terrace itself, as was previously mentioned, the patio has been reduced and the lawn area that's on the terrace has been increased. We're picturing this lawn area, as an activity lawn area that you would do, for the children to play closer to the pool. Also lawn chairs, chaise lounges, that sort of thing. And the area around the patio itself, like we said, has been reduced only so that we are, well within the required 30% impervious coverage. We also, removed a little bit of area on the front of the property. This entrance has been revised slightly from the drawing that you saw earlier. We shaved off a little bit of square footage to the left and the right. I also want to draw attention to, and if I zoom in here, you'll see a little bit closer, the pool area. So this is the pad that we're showing inside of here, which has a wall and then obviously a layer of shrubs and trees obscuring it from the neighbor's property line and from the homeowner's vantage point. And that's in addition to a lot of property line screening. So realistically, most of these utilities are going to be very well obscured just by these first round of plantings, let alone the second or the third round. So they really should be all but invisible, both from a noise and a visual site. Let me flip.
Can I ask you a real quick question?
Please, yeah.
What is that area? Is that lawn?
Which area? This area here?
Yeah, because I see stairs. So what are the stairs?
So this is a deck that's coming down from the top, from the architecture
okay.
down. There's a slight grade change, a color change between, this is wood, which is the deck on the house, and this is the patio down below. And there's the transition between the two.
green area in that
The-
cloud.
These
What
are
is-
trees.
Okay.
So what we're suggesting here is paper bark maples, which have that exfoliating white bark and look very dramatic in a grove. And so we're trying to create a very naturalistic setting there. More than likely an evergreen planting down below to exaggerate the whiteness of the bark as a foil against the evergreen foliage. It might be helpful, just in the interest in time and not to drone on. I think maybe if it's helpful, I'm happy to just answer direct questions if that's maybe easier at this point. I'm open to that, unless you want me to keep going through.
Questions?
I have two questions.
Claire? Sorry, I thought you said you had one. Yeah.
I do.
Go ahead.
So the climbing hydrangea
Yep.
and the black mesh fence that's going on top of the retaining wall,
Yep.
that fence, how does that respond, like, how does it bear the weight of a plant like that?
So we use it as a deer fence. So it's made out of hexagonal mesh. So part of the reason that it disappears in the landscape is, to my eye, when you have verticals and horizontals like a grid work, those stick out like a sore thumb. The mesh moves in 30, 60, diagonals basically, so it blends in with the branching structure. In terms of its, vigorousness, it'll take a vine, an armature, whatever it wants to grow on top of it. And just to be clear, the only reason why we're putting any sort of fence there is that there was a concern in the comments of how are we protecting someone from accidentally falling, over the 5-foot wall. If there wasn't a concern about that, we would have been happy with just the vegetation there's a large border. Between the edge of the lawn and the start of the wall, at the largest part, there's 12 to 14 feet. At the smallest part, it's 8 to 10 feet. If it was not obligated for us to put a wall, some type of barrier on the top of the wall, we would be happy not to do so. But I don't think that it's going to be an eyesore, and I don't think it's going to be onerous to do that. We've achieved that in other properties, and it looks, attractive.
So and then the hydrangea, what does that look like in the winter?
So we're doing a mix of English ivy and hydrangea. So the English ivy, is a vigorous grower right on the facade itself to create an evergreen armature, and then the hydrangea will flower and be deciduous, during the spring and summer months. So you can double plant a vine and you get 2 seasons out of it.
And it's the construction department that's requiring this black mesh fence? Is
It
that-
was, I can
It's fall
go,
protection,
Yeah,
anything over 4 feet.
At 5 feet, you still, it's kind of a hurdle to get up to 5 feet on a wall. I'm just thinking that from the neighbor's perspective, you have all these trees there. I'm wondering whether it's actually required in this situation with all the landscaping you have in the back. I know that it's going to eventually blend, but I think if I'm the backyard neighbor, I'm gonna be kind of unhappy about that in the beginning, maybe the first 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, Brian did that kind of fence right across, I live in a very hilly part, at least I live, just sold my house, in a very hilly part of Millburn, near, part of the South Mountain Reservation. And Brian put that fence up across the street and you cannot see it. But the concern we have about the fall protection is that, we have a generous planting zone, but we're not putting barberry or barrier plantings where we'll keep kids out. The fear is always that a neighbor kid might be not unfamiliar with the wall, and the ball goes through the bushes, and they run to get the ball, and they're not aware of a 4-foot fall. And they drop and hurt themselves. So it's really more protection for the people on the site, and the reason we've chosen that hexagonal mesh. And it does have a coated wire on the top, so it is rigid, but you can't run through it, and it can support landscape material, but, and it's not actually right on top, it sits right behind it, so it's about a foot and a half behind it. But it really does disappear, and then you've got, as Brian indicated, those green giant arborvitae will grow up, and they will start to grow right through that and into that. So, but it's a well-founded point, because God forbid somebody who's not familiar with the area runs through those bushes and they take a drop and they want something to hurt.
I think Rich brought up another good point, which is the row of trees that we have planted, which are on, obviously, the homeowner side. when those are planted behind the mesh disappears that much more. Even though the fence is in front of it, you see right through it and you actually see the plantings. And the spacing of the bar, the actual posts is about 16 feet on center, which is unusual. Usually a fence is between 6 to 8 inch. It's because of that tensioning wire and they're driven that allows us to do fewer posts. And that's really, the vertical is what you see, right? And the mesh is what blends away. So sometimes we plant one shrub on the outside of that fence to mask, the actual posts. I do think, let's put it this way, I know in 2 or 3 seasons it will be invisible. I know it's going to be very well hidden the first season of planting. So I don't want to, vouch that it'll be invisible day one, but it will be, within a couple seasons. So, and I think the risk, like, Rich was saying, of a potential hazard, certainly for that first year, just the risk mitigation is worthwhile. But we'll be open to whatever suggestion the board has.
And the height of that wall and the fence combination are fully compliant with the zoning code.
If that is a major problem for us, do we retain, I don't know if we've ever done this with a tree, but can we retain jurisdiction for 2 years, 4 years, to make sure that it does cover it? And that gives the neighbor the opportunity to come back if all of a sudden they cannot see nothing but wall
So I think we
X number
have
of years later.
retained landscaping jurisdiction in the past. So if the applicant is willing to agree to that as a condition, and I'll see, council, do you?
Can you give me an idea of how long?
Usually we ask for 2 years, but I guess here it
2.
would depend on the, when we expect it to be grown in and no longer a potential issue.
Would
So-
you think 2 years is sufficient?
I mean, I think it's, fair. I just, what's the scale of invisibility, because to one person, you could always, say, I can still see it. So I don't know what,
Well, the neighbor has to come to the city and say there's a problem.
so,
That's how that happens.
okay.
That's how,
And I'm not sure what else they
And
could
I'm
install.
assuming we're gonna probably do the same with water.
Well, there could be arborvitae on the other, I mean, the other alternative is to pull the retaining wall in onto the property a little bit closer and put these arborvitae and some of these plantings on the other side of the retaining wall. That's another,
So
option.
let's
right?
put it this way, it would be very easy if I were to have added the herbaceous and the shrub layer to this drawing and shown it in section. I think it would show it much more successfully how it's gonna be hidden right away. Right now, it's just this green shaded color, which is hard to kind of picture. So, I mean, I think a 2-year, kind of waiting period and seeing how it grows in, I think that makes sense.
And with regard to drainage, your engineering department requires that we, as part of the permit, I think they require us to put it on our drawings, that we are responsible, so that if there's any
Right.
adverse impact on adjoining neighbors, it's our responsibility to fix that. So that's part of your grading permit that's approved by your engineering department now. That's a condition on any permit, is we recognize that any adverse impact on drainage, it's our responsibility.
I'm just realizing you're not using a microphone and they're gonna get me up.
It's also in the engineer's review, so if that's a condition of approval, we're also agreeing to that already.
Okay.
As long as you're back up. You mentioned real quick that the drainage for the driveway runs to the street. Maybe you guys can clarify this for me. I thought that wasn't allowed, or was needed to be
From the
kept
circular part of the driveway, it comes forward.
to the street.
But that's where it goes now, and there's actually still a reduction. And then from that point, we pick up all the roof leaders, so the roof leaders that are currently landing on the property and going out to the street, those are being directed around at the back. But
I thought we had to put those,
trench drain?
trench drain on driveways.
Well, I think in this case, we really want to continue that pattern. I can check, I don't know if there's any storm water, any sewerage in the street there, I don't think there is.
There is.
So I think we know that it's a reduction, but I'd like to there's less going to the street than there was before. But I don't want to be directing even more water into the back, although we've got a 33% oversized system. I'd like to kind of keep that as the natural dividing point where it is, knowing that we've reduced flows in both directions.
So I just think my question would be, is that a requirement?
So just to be clear, just so we're more specific, this is a drain, this is the low point. from
Sorry,
this
I'm not
area,
paying attention.
all the way, this goes downhill to
Right,
this
so-
drain.
So that pitches back.
Correct, as does all of this. This is the high point here. This all goes down into this drain.
Okay.
This is the high point here that goes down into this drain. This is the high point here that goes down into this drain. So
So it
the
does
only
pitch away
water,
from the street.
correct, the only water that's going off of the site is either because we obviously do not want to disturb any of
Right,
the
right.
grades around the trees, but the only hardscape that's draining forward is from the property line basically out, right? So that's the right of way.
Could you show
Where
her
are
the
the, I
drains
mean,
again?
where, are the drains on the drawings?
Probably not on here.
They're on
Down
the
here?
drawing, yes. There's one I'm looking at the screen is the same drawing that you guys are looking at.
Okay, so
So the
maybe
little-
it's just
the
harder
little
for me
one.
to see it in the half scale.
So I
All right.
misunderstood. I thought the driveway was pitched toward the street.
Yeah, I did too.
That was my mistake.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for making me look bad again.
So it's just this part that's draining to the street?
It's-
Because
it's
up
real-
to here,
it's the
this
center
part
of
you're
the-
saying is caught by the
Yes,
drains?
correct. And that, again, the grading of keeping the aprons the exact same grade that they were was, dictated by the sidewalk, the street, and of course, the oak trees that we want to preserve. So, there was no reason to change that and to change the water flow.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I do just want to jump back. Where did we land on the landscaping jurisdiction? Do we want to retain it for 2 years?
2 years.
2
Okay,
years.
and you're agreeable to that?
Yes.
More questions for the landscape engineer? Architect, witness, whatever.
I have a question. This was touched on before. Behind, on the rear of the property, behind the wall, that's green. How do you get there to maintain it, and what is it you're saying, that's where these forsythias are gonna be planted, and how do they get maintained? How do you
So-
get there? I mean,
So we can walk around this direction and get to here and walk along at this direction. You can do the same on the other side, which this can be where the end of the wall is. You can walk along this way and you can do pruning and whatnot. It's no more difficult than any other. Whenever you have to get someplace to blow leaves, there's always a low spot on the property. So it's not an impossibility for maintenance to take place there, but it's mostly pruning work and plant care.
Yeah,
It's
but
not.
like, ladders back there and everything?
I mean, if you needed to get a ladder, you could get a ladder back there, sure. You just hand it down the wall, is what you'd be doing. So you'd hand a step ladder down to the person working below the wall.
What is the depth back there from the wall to the property line? Because I think there's a fence at the
6 feet.
neighbors have a
It's either
fence.
6 feet or 8 feet. Yeah, so you have 6 feet from the property line to the face of the wall. So it's a narrow area, for sure, and that's why, for example, evergreen viburnum grow to 6 to 8 feet tall and wide, and so they create, a nice understory that would block the wall, and you can still walk around them. It's not like a hardship to do that. And forsythia is another deciduous example, but it's not gonna be trees down there. It's going to be, 8 to 10 foot tall evergreen and deciduous shrubs.
There any irrigation down there or no?
So any place that we're putting plantings, for them to be successful, there's gonna be drip or some sort of irrigation. Yeah, certainly. So the plan that we're putting together for John Linson, it would be very easy to add a supplementary layer of the larger shrub material to show how we're gonna further obscure and treat that area below the wall, just to show how we're successfully mitigating it.
Yeah. More questions from the board? Questions from the public? Questions from our experts? Well, they're both raising their hands. Go.
Could you talk about the cistern and the functioning of the cistern? What kind of equipment may be out there for it?
Sure.
Anything?
So it's all but invisible from above grade. There's a small manhole that sometimes we put artificial sod on top of, and then you know where it is, but you can still play on top of it. The main purpose of it is that whenever you get a massive summer storm, you try to hold on to that water for as long as possible, and you use the 1,700 gallons, to augment the irrigation during the hottest months. During the wettest months of the year, every time it rains, the reservoir runs full and then overflows into the other system, so that if it's raining 3 or 4 days in a row and then you want to turn the irrigation on for 2 days later, it's 100% ready to go. And then there's a switch that transfers between the pump and drawing city water, so that it's always water on demand. Inside, it's very simple. There's just a pump and there's a float valve inside that measures when the water gets down too low to where the pump is, and that's when it would have an autofill to fill the water level back up with city water. So, really, I wish it was a real money saver. It probably takes 20 years for it to pay for itself based on the install cost. That's not the reason. It's nice, though, that instead of letting all this water just run through, that you're trying to reuse what's already landing on the site. And it helps with all the things we're trying to do as an engineer, which is to hold the water, to reuse things and not be wasteful, and not to just let the water run off after the first hour or two after a storm. So there are different systems. Graf is a German company that we've used that makes a wonderful kind of all-inclusive system. They have plastic composites, there's concrete, there's all sorts of things that can be used. It's just about picking the right system for the amount of volume that we're trying to hold. So, and obviously, where we're keeping the reservoir is not the lowest part of the property, but it is lower significantly than other parts. And so the pump just has to be a 1 or a 2 horsepower that gives enough pressure to pump the water uphill. So the head of the pump is like a 50-foot head or something like that.
So where are the hoses that are going to the drip
So
system?
everything is subterranean. So for lack of a better word, it's a turret that the manhole sits on top of. And about a foot down, there's a whole radius of different pipes that connect. And basically, the water from the pump supplies the main for the irrigation, and the irrigation distributes it through all the valve boxes, and then the drip is all below ground. So the only irrigation that you see visually are the mist heads and the rotors in the lawn, but they all retract back down. So, I mean, it's trying to be as invisible as possible, and it's only in operation during the early hours of the morning.
Okay.
That's
And I think you answered the other questions that I had, so thank you.
Just one question. I had this question for the engineer. It's along lot 13 in the south. You're almost there in that back corner. There are 2 trees back there. Are they proposed to be removed?
So both of these trees, there's an 8-inch Norway maple and a 6-inch black cherry. They could be removed easily. We did not propose to remove any tree that we didn't have to, because we were trying to keep the number of tree removals as low as possible. Full disclosure, when we met with John Linson, he was pointing out, well, what about that tree? What about that tree? That tree's diseased. Why aren't you taking that one down? And I said, John, we'll come back for a second ask. We don't want to start asking on the front end to take too many trees down. So yes, these 2 trees are right next to the property line. If we can get them to last, great. If that's something that we need to successfully have removed, we can do that as well. I do think neither of these are specimen trees. They're already just hedgerows that were left over. If you can see where the fence line is, they just more than likely got seeded there by a bird that sat on the fence and pooped out a seed. So I'm just saying it's more than likely that they're just naturally occurring. So forgive the naturalist here. But I'm just saying, so those are definitely volunteers, and there's no great specimen to them.
Yeah, just in looking at that, you may want to review that with John Linson, being that you're 6 feet away and you'll be filling with the new retaining wall and everything else. It probably will compromise the root systems of those trees. So that's something to take a look at.
So you're going to review every tree on this property with Mr. Linson?
Yeah, I mean, they're all numbered, literally. Those are tree number 31 and 32, so we can
Right.
do that, yes.
So we can, okay.
Chairman Steiner, can I ask one more question?
I'm sorry?
Can I ask another question?
You can ask as many more questions as you need.
I don't want to be here. You said that the cistern has city water fill?
So the water that's coming from the town water comes into the house, and then there's usually a valve that normally supplies the irrigation system in
Right.
general, right? There's a backflow preventer and then a 1-inch manifold with a threaded adapter. That usually just goes directly to a valve box, right, and then feeds the system. What we have is from the house itself, there's a 1-inch line that runs to the cistern, and that as soon as that, valve tells you that there's too little or too much water, it'll do an autofill into the cistern directly. So instead of drawing directly from the city water, it does it on demand into the valve. So it kind of fills up the reservoir as you go. So it doesn't use any more water than it otherwise
So
would.
that'll never be empty then?
So the goal is, while the irrigation is running, you always keep it full if you need to. Otherwise, you will keep it, there's usually a high and a low water. And believe it or not, with Ratio and other systems, they're predictive apps. If it's going to rain in 5 hours, it holds the autofill, until the rain event happens. It senses how filled it got, and then it turns the autofill on later. So, I mean, It's a pretty smart system, and it's getting smarter.
So what would happen, like what happened over the last month and a half when we had no rain, and then there's a drought issue?
So-
Is the occupant gonna shut it off so it doesn't fill?
Right, so if we're watering the lawn, and if we're watering the system, and we're allowed to water the system, it would just run 100% normally like any irrigation system would. If there's, a drought restriction, we would just comply to what we ever needed to do. So the goal, the one positive part is there were storm events where we received a quarter of an inch, sometime in that last 40 days when it was so dry. What's helpful about that is it would have saved all of that, and we would have used that water right before we went to city water. So,
Is that customarily how these systems are installed, to use city water as a supplement?
let's put it this way. If the goal was to be, the only reason we're doing this is try to use less city water, right, than we would otherwise. Well, we'd be whatever we're catching, the 1,700 gallons, every time, that's using that much less every time we use it. Otherwise, we'd be just using city water constantly, like every other system does. So this is trying to reuse. All it's doing is putting a reservoir before the retention, right? So.
Just following up, though, with the irrigation system, is this one where the company comes out and turns it on in the spring and off in the fall? So that for a big chunk of the drought we've just been through, the system probably wouldn't have been irrigating anyway?
Unless let me put it this way, unless there's a drought restriction that you're not supposed to irrigate, we would be using the system straight through, just like any other irrigation system would be.
Okay, I'm thinking of sprinkler systems, which are typically turned on in the spring and turned off in
So
the fall.
the goal also is that it runs full, right? So when spring happens, the
Yeah.
reservoir is completely full already because it's saved, we've done systems in the past that are thousands of gallons, and that's when you start to have a real noticeable, appreciable effect. When you're in the hundreds or
Yeah.
it's not
Okay.
as effective.
Okay.
But you don't want it on when it's freezing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We're not running the sprinklers in the winter.
You don't want it on when it's freezing. I mean, like this
Correct.
morning.
It's
Somebody shuts
April
it off.
until November is
Yeah.
when it's
Okay.
usually used.
Right.
It does
And
get
so,
turned
so,
off.
so then, yes, so for a chunk of the drought, there wouldn't, yes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to allay Mr. Nelson's concerns.
Well, I don't think the people that maintain the sprinkler system wouldn't come out and shut it off if there's a drought. That's up to the homeowner.
It's literally an
Right,
electric,
it's a
there's
switch,
no
yeah.
mechanical, it's all digital at this point, and there's actuators on the valve. Look, the whole long story short is we're trying to save more water
I get
as
it, I
opposed to
get it. I mean,
using as much, that's the long story short.
I was just shocked to hear that there's city water supply to it, because I think of old-fashioned cisterns. And my grandmother had a cistern at her house. Caught the rainwater, never drank it.
Yeah.
It was only used for gardening.
Yeah.
But that was an underground well, so to speak, underground tank.
So
Yeah.
all irrigation systems use
Yeah,
the city
yeah.
water, we're just choosing not to use the city
Correct. No,
water
I
as
get-
often as
yeah.
possible. That's all.
One more chance for the public. I know it's a second chance. Okay, no other questions? Are
I
you
have
gonna
no
do
more.
your,
I have a very,
you're gonna do yours, et cetera? I have a feeling that we
Quick.
should take our 5-minute break right now.
okay,
We'll be back here at 12 after.
okay.
Okay, before we go to the summary from the attorney, we will open the meeting to comments from the public. This is the time that we told you you can come forward and tell us what you feel about the case, positive or negative. You will be sworn in to do so. Anyone wish to opine on this particular case? Seeing none, we will turn it over to Ms. Hillary to
All right.
give us
So-
the summary.
Okay, so this accident turned opportunity has allowed for an improved plan which controls drainage and runoff and the stabilization of the rear yard of the property, benefiting the surrounding properties and creating a tiered and usable backyard consistent with surrounding homes on Prospect Hill Avenue. Only a portion of the retaining walls, landscaping and green space, and the dry well system are located in the steep slopes. The civil engineer explained that the steep slope disturbance will not negatively affect or impact surrounding neighbors or the community health, safety, or welfare. Erosion, siltation, and surface runoff will be contained. No unstable conditions will result, and a comprehensive stormwater management plan has been designed to capture runoff in a manner compliant with the ordinance and which will promote sound stormwater management and slope stabilization for adjoining downslope properties on Argyle Court. The landscape architect described the extensive landscape plan that will be phased in during and after construction, the mitigating effect the landscaping will have on drainage, and the commitment to maintaining the existing character of the neighborhood with the front yard plantings. The landscape plan as a whole will provide an aesthetic benefit which will promote a desirable visual environment while also maintaining adequate light, air, and open space. Based on the testimony and presentation tonight, it is requested that the board approve the variance request for the disturbance of steep slopes on the property.
Thank you. At this point, the hearing closes, and we ask our attorney to give us any conditions and to tell us how many votes are required.
Sure, so we have 3 conditions. First is our usual, compliance with those conditions noted in the board engineer's memorandum. Second is that the landscaping plans will be submitted to the city forester for review and approval. And third, the board shall retain landscaping jurisdiction for a period of 2 years from completion of construction. And we're talking only about a C variance here, steep slope disturbance, so 4 out of the 7 members are required to approve.
Okay, who would like to, we now move into executive session where the board discusses it, and then we will make a decision. Who would like to kick off the discussion? Tom, you look like you're ready.
Well, I'm trying to gather my thoughts, but okay, I'll try to wing it here a little. So I came in concerned about before I visited the site, I should say also, I came in very concerned about this, accidental steep slope disturbance. We get a lot of these, not a lot, we get a number of these applications where mistakes happen. Sometimes it seems like an honest mistake. Sometimes it seems like there might be some doubt. In this case, I'm comfortable with the testimony that this was an accidental event and actually relatively minor. I mean, I hadn't thought about how minor a disturbance has to be to qualify as a steep slope disturbance. It sounds like it was a very minor one, so I'm comfortable with that. I think the applicant has put in a very, very attractive and very extensive landscaping plan. I'm relying on the condition we added, that further discussion, approval of the plan by the forester. Seems like water is managed very properly and very effective. There won't be any negative impact that, based on the testimony and the conditions on the neighbors from that. Whatever's going on in the back is hidden from street view on the front. And I share some of the concerns that were mentioned about the landscaping in the back, but it seems like the plantings along the walls in the back will be pretty good at the beginning, and, we have retained jurisdiction for 2 years in case it doesn't do as they promise. I think that was it. So with all that, I can support the application.
Okay. Anyone else?
I think I too can support the application. This is mostly sort of around the edges, my comments. Tom got the gist of it. To the extent the neighbor on lot 14 in Argyle, I think they said that was a builder lot, so, a spec house. And we have all seen that spec houses may not begin with the same amount of landscaping that someone building for him or herself would put in. So that neighbor may well decide independently of this that they need some more landscaping. As a former member of HPC, I always take their comments seriously. I had been in the prior house. I was sorry to see it go. But in this circumstance where the variance has nothing to do with the house, we don't need the blueprints of the house. I think HPC is used to seeing them and used to commenting on them, and might have just felt a little umbrage that they didn't get to this time around, but it's not part of their portfolio for this, in this instance. And again, like Tom, I think that there's a lot of thought. They've gone over and above, particularly on the stormwater management, now that we have a 100-year storm every year. I was very glad to see that, and I think this is an improvement. So I certainly can support this as well.
Anyone on this side?
I
Yeah.
also can
Okay.
support this. I think that the landscaping, the big thing for me is landscaping for the neighbors in the back, just making sure that they have, and I think that's taken care of. Just for the board's benefit, I will say I did disagree with one thing Mr. Keller said about how a 20% grade will seem flat on a big backyard. I don't think that's true. That's, it's, if you go out 100 feet, that's 20 feet of change of elevation. So just for the board's perspective, like 20% grade is a significant grade. Doesn't change sort of my opinion on the value of this project, and all of the work that you've done in the landscaping plan is really, it looks like it's going to be a beautiful home and property, and that it will contribute to the neighborhood. But just in terms of technically, I don't agree with that 20% grade is not as significant. It's pretty significant. In fact, if you're driving on a highway and 8% grade, they tell trucks they have runaway truck ramps at 8% grade. So 20% is pretty steep. So that's my little bit there for everybody else, just in case you didn't know that, but
If you've ridden a bicycle, 13% is steep.
yeah.
Okay, anyone else? Well, what I will tell you is that when I came into this, I really wanted to say, let's put it back the way it was and go from there. And then I found out I couldn't do that, because once you drove the machinery over it, you disturbed it, and there was no way to bring it back. So what do we do that makes it the best it can be? And I think what we've done here, or what they've proposed here, does that. It gives them more recreation, gives them a pool, gives them a very beautiful property. It does save some water here and there. It does do a lot of things for them. It does not affect their neighbors, with the exception of visual acuity, and I think we've solved that one, that if it does become a problem, the neighbors will have some way to deal with it by picking up the phone and talking to their neighbors, and hopefully that does it. If that doesn't do it, then they call the city hall, and Ms. Sulios gets to deal with it. But I think that this should be approved, and I would entertain a motion at this point to approve.
I'll move to approve with the conditions as described.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Yuko?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Ms. Zahn?
Yes.
Mr. Malay?
Yes.
Ms. Toth?
Yes.
Ms. Chifo?
Yes.
Chairman Steiner?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate
Congratulations.
it.
We will move forward to Elena Holdings, which is a carry from a prior meeting in September.
Chairman? Yes. So before we get started, I just want to note two things. First, Mr. Yuko has recused from the application. Second, Mrs. Zahn is unable to certify that she's eligible to vote for this evening, so if it does get to the point where we have a vote, we will be down one member there. Joe, you ready?
Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. James Weber of Alfonso and Weber on behalf of the applicant, Elena Holdings. This is a continuation of the hearing for 29 Ridge Road. At the last time we were here, the question had come up with regard to the inventory of the trees and the recommendation that there be a review of the health and status of the trees that currently occupy the property. That has been undertaken, and as a result, we've had the plans revised to increase the mitigation. And in doing that, have had the opportunity to submit that to John Linson, the city forester. He has prepared a report that stated 11/14/24, a copy of which should have been submitted to each board member. That report points out that he met with Jared Kest, Richard Wolowitz on the site on September 26, 2024. It seems that Jared Kest's landscape plans make the best long-term use of the property, even though it necessitates the removal of many trees. The drainage improvements are extensive. There will be a temporary loss of screening to the adjacent property, but it will be well compensated in the end. I recommend approval. So if the board recalls, the original comments from John Linson, they were critical. They were perspective and they were critical. As a result, we have taken that opportunity at the board's recommendation to go back to the site with Mr. Linson to improve the plans. In regard to the landscape, of course, it's a Jared Kest plan, so it's significant, it's detailed, it's thorough, and it's beautiful. With regard to the engineering, as you may recall, and I'm doing this just to refresh the board's memory, this stormwater management plan is 4.5 times that which is required. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that comes to 450% over what is required by ordinance. So it's a significant stormwater plan, and it deals with water that comes from off-site. So there's a community benefit associated with that. With regard to the elimination of the berms, which were probably created when the original house was constructed, they excavated, put the soils as berms on Fernwood and Ridge. As you know from the testimony, that goes all the way to the curb. So if you're a pedestrian walking the street, there's no ability to hop off, and as a result, the safety is being improved on Fernwood and Ridge. With regard to the rear, what's being proposed is a 3.5-foot retaining wall on one side. At that point, it will be heavily landscaped, and indeed, in order to replace some of the trees, some of the junipers are going in at 20 to 22 feet at time of planting. Just 3. They're too expensive to do it further than that, but it's a significant step by the applicant to try to appease the neighbors. They've also moved the driveway, which can be 2 feet off the property line, to 8 feet off the property line. So the ordinance allows 2, they've quadrupled that. And likewise, the retaining wall along that property line, usually you're 2 feet off the property line to allow for footings and construction. They're 5 feet off the property line. Landscaping below the 3.5-foot retaining wall and landscaping on top. There will be trees removed, and that's the point. There will be a yard that's going to be constructed in the back, and it's going to be leveled in order to provide with the significant residential home, the backyard space that is typical of the area and of Summit. Unless there's any questions of me, I would ask that Jared Kest be recalled to the stand to bring the board up to date on the latest plan.
Questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Proceed.
And I'll just note for the record, you were previously sworn at the last hearing, remain under oath, and your credentials were accepted at that time.
Great. Thank you very much. So as Mr. Weber explained, I was able to visit the site with the arborist Rich Wolowitz and John Linson, and we did review the entire property. It was a very good meeting. We went tree by tree. Literally anything from 3 inches in diameter breast height to up to the largest tree on the property, which is about 26 inches in diameter. 36.
And when you talk about a tree, the definition of a tree under the city ordinance is that a 6-inch diameter at breast height. So you actually counted seedlings and saplings.
Sure.
Or even some trees along the north property line that are 2 inches. I mean, they're not really trees under the ordinance. They're saplings. And
That's
the
correct.
ordinance does not recognize those.
That's correct. So, considering the new ordinance and trees 12 inches and greater requiring mitigation, we did update the plan, and the plan you have in front of you.
We are going to ask you to speak up a little bit.
Sure. So per the latest ordinance, trees 12 inches and greater in diameter at breast height do require mitigation. So we did update the plan to fulfill those requirements and far exceed those requirements, and that is shown on the plan that you have in front of you.
Can you hear him, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
So in total, what we're adding to the property are 47 shade and ornamental trees. We're also planting 58 evergreen trees. So in total, 105 trees will be added to the property. And we're also keeping 11. So the net increase of trees on the property between what is being removed and what is being added is there will be 46 more trees on the property when this project is completed than there are today. So specifically, some of the trees we added, which, again, being mindful of the neighborhood, the aesthetic of the neighborhood, also trying to reintroduce, the next generation of canopy trees in Summit. Most of the projects we are involved in are either new construction or major renovations. And, there are a lot of old trees on these properties that are in poor health, structurally damaged, and so on. So, we have been mindful over the last decade of planting trees that are of the same species and kind that will be the next canopy over the next 40, 50, 60, 100 years. So an example of that, in the rear yard, specifically along the property line, we have added some swamp white oaks. So, it's not the greatest name of a tree, a swamp white oak, but white oak is that picturesque tree that you see in Summit that I think most people would identify as the tree of Summit. Unfortunately, white oaks are not offered in the nursery industry because they just do not transplant well. So the next best thing is a swamp white oak. So at the Freedom Tower, for example, the bosque of trees that you see in those plazas, those are swamp white oaks, right? So for the last 10 years, we have been planting these trees, and now they're really becoming this kind of mid-story canopy, and ultimately that upper canopy that everyone loves. They have that beautiful same bark, shaggy bark, light in color and so on, but also have that nice wide spreading canopy. So along the northern property boundary, we have added 5 of these trees. We have also added another 4 of them along the western property boundary. This is in addition to the landscaping we had shown in our previous plan, okay? In the front yard, further supporting this canopy improvement, we have sugar maples, and at time of planting, I think it's important to note the size of the trees that we're planting. You know, it's a little deceiving when we say we're planting a 5-inch caliper tree. It doesn't sound very big. But a 5-inch caliper tree could be 30 feet tall and 16, 18 feet wide, right? So in the end, when we re-landscape the entire side of Ridge, you know, we will have a bigger canopy than is there today, okay? And what it will also do, unlike a much more mature trees have a very high canopy, so they're not really screening anything at the lower levels. A tree of a 5-inch caliper size, or even a 4-inch caliper size, will screen the actual facade of the house, right? So you're not getting this harsh view of the entire architecture at one time. You're really getting a filtered view, and the rendering that we had earlier, you know, it's a softened view of the house through the trees, right? And you'll see all the way around Ridge, down Fernwood, there are layers of trees before you're seeing house, right? So we have created this lush interior garden space buffered by flowering cherries and these sugar maples, and we have some magnolia in the front yard. You know, that with the white oaks in the backyard, you know, this is a heavily treed property, much more than it is today. So in summary, you know, the goal when anyone hires us to do any project, and it's the reason I do this for a living, is to make the end result more beautiful than we found it. And I feel confident as a landscape architect with a lot of experience in this town doing this type of work that this will be no exception.
I have nothing further.
Our experts?
I do not have any questions.
No questions, Chairman.
Okay. Board members?
I have a question. I mean, now we're getting to go into the winter season. When would, if this is approved tonight, when would you be able to get the trees in along the back property line? Because those are all new trees. I mean, when would they be planted?
We're going back to the northern property line.
Yes, I guess that's it.
So I'm not the contractor, so that's not, I can't speak to the schedule per se, but typically, the site work, meaning any removals and grading and heavy construction, the retaining walls and so on, would have to be in place first. And then right after that retaining wall went in on the north side is when all that plant material can go in. But really, to do it sooner would be damaging that plant material.
Let's wait for your attorney to come back. I think he's gathering information. He's doing research.
Well, I guess, okay, he's back. If I can follow up, I mean, I know,
Go ahead,
for
please do.
instance, yes, you, just sort of on general timeframes for this, I know you don't build roads and all that in the cold weather months. You don't want to pour concrete and all that, so we're looking at starting sometime in the spring when it's above 50 degrees, is what you're saying?
That is correct. The trees and so on will be planted sometime in the spring.
One of the points that has happened is during the construction of this property at 29 Ridge, the trees that, the Norway spruces that are around 10 feet off the property line, they've been kept in order to shield the neighbors to the north from the construction activity. They'll be willing to, if it works out during the construction, that they can be held as long as possible to maintain that screening until the plants can be put in. Now, we don't know what the contractor's gonna say and whether or not that'll be doable, but it should be possible to put the retaining wall in, and get that grading done. Keep those until the very last moment before they can come down. And that way, the screening for the neighbors to the north can be preserved until the new plants are put in. And so that break in that timeline will be reduced.
Okay, more questions? Do we have is that a condition that you're willing to? I don't know.
Because we're not sure as to how the construction's gonna go, because you're gonna have grading going on, you have the retaining wall. I think best efforts would be an appropriate tenor of that condition.
Okay. We will leave the attorneys to figure out the appropriate language, but get the right meaning. Any other questions? Any other questions from the public? Yes, you've raised your hand. Please come forward and give us your name and address.
Sure. Todd Glassband, Glasband, 42 Fernwood Road. Just some questions as to the new landscaping plan before us here. Can you elaborate on, I know you talked about some trees and you have some caliber measurements below. How long will it take for these trees that you plan on planting to get to the height of the screening trees that are currently on the property?
Which trees are you referring to as the screening trees?
Well, let's look on here. I see number 28. It's a Norway spruce. This tree is about 45 to 50 feet high and screens from what will be the end of the driveway to our entire house.
An objection to the statement as to the height of that Norway spruce. There's been no testimony with regard to that, and unless you're an arborist, your opinion here during the question is just unsupported. So if you could just focus your question.
I think what he was
Excuse me,
asking was
yeah.
how long will it take for the tree that's replacing it to get to that
I
height?
think you can answer the question,
Is
right?
that he's saying that it's 48 to 50 feet high, and that's where I'm drawing an exception. Certainly can answer a question with regard to.
Well,
how
to
long
whatever
it
height
takes.
it is now, and your witness can estimate the height it is now, and what'll it take to get there?
Very good.
That's difficult to estimate because we don't know the height of that tree. I mean, that's a big speculation. From my experience, if I were to guess the height of that tree, it's not taller than 35 to 40 feet, but I don't know the height of that tree. I don't have that measuring ability. But we are planting 3 trees in that 20 to 22 foot size, which are significant. And what should be noted is that the trees that are being planted are full to the bottom, whereas the trees that I think he's speaking about have a needle cast and are very open at the bottom, so they actually provide a lot more screening at the bottom. As far as the height, an arborvitae grows anywhere from 12 to 18 inches, sometimes more, annually. So if you take it even on the conservative approach, 1 foot a year, right, and we're starting at 22 and let's just say it's 40, that's in 18 years, it'll be 40 feet tall. But I think the height is only one characteristic of this tree. I think if you visited the property, this tree is not a specimen tree. The arborist has determined that it has needle cast, and what that means is it will continue to drop its needles. So it's becoming more porous over time. So in the end, you're having a tree that's in decline, which is currently there, being replaced with 3 new healthy trees.
Okay.
Okay, and in regards to the swamp white oaks that are again on the north end of the property line, how long do you think it will take for those to get to the height of the trees that are currently there?
Well, I don't believe there's any trees in that specific area that are of size. These trees will be anywhere from 20 to 30 feet tall, depending on where those trees are ultimately harvested from at the day of planting. So in my experience, when planted at the spacing that are here, these will be touching each other. Their leaf canopies will literally be touching each other to create a solid upper band of screening. To reach the height of what could be a 70-foot tree, I would only be speculating to how quick those trees would grow based on the watering conditions and light and so on. I think it's just going to vary over time.
Okay. And then just regarding the trees in total that you plan on, I think you said you were going to keep 11. Of the trees that are being removed, can you just speak to how you guys decided which trees should be kept and which should be removed?
Largely, the trees that are being removed and kept are driven by their health, and then also by the stormwater management system, and also by regrading of the rear yard to achieve that flatter yard, and that's also decreasing the runoff onto the neighboring property.
Okay. Specifically, tree number 60 on this plan is listed in good condition. Can you speak to why you would want to remove this tree that's in good condition?
Where's tree
There-
60? 60. So tree number 60 is a native black cherry tree. And if I'm looking at this properly, it's a 10-inch diameter tree. It is just a wild tree, like similar, not that, previous testimony of a bird on the fence kind of tree. It's that type of tree. It's not a significant tree. It doesn't have any great form and so on. And I think with the construction of this retaining wall, a tree in that condition really, might suffer during the construction of that retaining wall. So it just seemed like a logical conclusion that that tree should be removed.
If the retaining wall wasn't placed there?
Follow up for a second.
Sure.
It could be left there, there's no need to take it down affirmatively, just that your thought is that when the retaining wall is being constructed, it might not survive. If it were to be kept, would it affect your landscape plan adversely?
Well, I think it affects the overall plan, and it really would affect the screening to the neighboring property, which is your property. So what is going there instead are 10 to 12-foot arborvitaes planted touching each other at the time of planting. So they could stay if they were deemed, something that the board wanted to stay. I just don't see the overall benefit of keeping that 10-inch black cherry.
Did Mr. Linson opine on that?
He did not.
Okay.
And largely because trees under 12 inches are not
No, I
required.
just know that you had,
No, we did
you
walk the
went
entire
tree by
property.
tree, so.
But, we were focused on the trees that I think everyone here are focused on, right? And those are the bigger trees in the middle of the yard. So, and what we did learn in that process is that one of them is hollow. We're not sure what the condition of the other ones are. We assume that they're good, and we listed them as good, and the arborist did as well. But they may be hollow for all we know.
Okay. How about, can you speak to tree number 14 that your arborist certified as a good tree as well, with a 28-inch, or you have it as 26-inch, he has 28-inch diameter. What is the benefit of taking that tree down? Why does
So-
that tree need to come down?
Yeah, no, great question. So in order to grade the yard properly, right now the yard currently drains down, to the north from the other property from the west. And by flattening that yard, we're going to be filling that area 3 to 4 feet with soil. So instead of burying that tree, which ultimately would stress and kill that tree, we think that the benefit of the removal of that tree by improving the stormwater is significant enough to do so.
Okay, but if the objection, if the object is not to get a flat backyard, but to retain trees that are in fact healthy, can you speak to some of these trees that are coming down for no reason other than to get a flat backyard? I see number 40, I see number 45. In the previous hearing on September 16th, we came and we said, we're going to speak to this board, and we want to tell you about all these trees that are in poor health and why they need to come down. We have the arborist report right here, and of these trees, 40 trees are listed as fair and good and want to
What's
be
the
removed.
question? Remember, we got to go to questions
Sure.
here, not opinions.
So can you just explain why the trees on the west side of the property that are all listed on the arborist report as poor are all being retained? I'll read you the numbers: 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67. All identified as poor and dead, but you guys, I'm asking why you're choosing to retain those trees.
Simply because there's no conflict with the work that is going on.
And the other point as well is that there have been discussions with the Sanks. Phyllis Sank has spoken with,
Mr. Weber, you have to use the microphone.
the
Sorry.
neighbor is Phyllis Sank, and she has had an opportunity to speak with Matt, and she has asked that those trees be retained. So because they're not interfered with in the regrading of the site, there's no reason to remove them.
Mr. Weber, may I ask you, we asked you on behalf of Mr. Michalopoulos to retain all of these trees that we are now pointing out. And can you
This is
tell me,
beyond the scope
can
of
you
the-
tell me
What-
why
what's
you are not appeasing us? That's,
We'd like to know the question.
sure, the question is, why are you granting Mrs. Sank the benefit of retaining these trees and not granting us that same benefit?
Well, one, it's not my decision. I'm not the applicant, but I can speak to that. The trees that are on the northern property line are within 10 feet of the property line. They are on the Matt Michalopoulos property entirely. The discussions, and that you've heard me advert to the fact that the retaining wall was moved in 5 feet rather than 2 feet. Driveway's been relocated. 20 to 22-foot tall trees at time of planting are being installed, were all those steps that were taken to appease the glass bands on the northern side. Ms. Sank, in her request, was more accommodating, was more reasonable. She said, these which are on the property line, can we keep these? And the answer was yes.
Okay, so I could keep going through all
Yeah,
the
well,
trees that
that-
are listed as good and question Mr. Cass, but
My
just
guess
out-
is you'd get the same answer on each one.
Okay, so the last and final question I just had for you, Mr. Cass, just trying to understand your plan regarding the arborvitaes that you show a row of arborvitaes above the retaining wall on the boulder wall on our property. Do you plan on replacing those trees that are currently there with these arborvitaes?
I'm not sure which trees you're talking about. The black cherry and the beech tree,
No,
60 and
you have,
59?
starting from the entirety of the retaining wall, in between their proposed retaining wall and our boulder wall, which you have denoted here, you have a list of, it shows, I can't even get to the number, 23 arborvitae green giants, 10 to 12 feet. I can walk over to you and point them to you if you,
No, I see
Okay.
them. There's no trees in that area that you're speaking about, so that's why I'm
okay. Do
confused.
you recall planting viburnum trees on that same boulder wall for us when you developed our property that currently stand there now?
Oh, I see now. So, one, you're referring to a viburnum shrub, so this is a very technical conversation about trees being 6 and 12. Yes, there are viburnum shrubs there. Those can remain. Those, I believe, are very close to that boulder wall, and anything that would be on the subject property in conflict with these arborvitaes would have to be removed, yes.
I just didn't, it's a simple question, just because I see you don't show the viburnums, and I just wanted to know if you're replacing the viburnums according to your plan with these arborvitaes, or if you plan on showing them further back.
Well, the answer is the viburnums don't show up on any survey because they're not trees. Shrubs do not show up on any survey, so we can't respond to that in any design manner. My understanding, I did not physically plan anything on your property. I drew them on a landscape plan for you. There's a big difference between those things. So I'm not exactly sure of the location because there's no plan showing the exact location. Now, if those trees are important to you, and that's obviously up to my client, and they need to be relocated off of his property, then I believe that could happen. But
We have Andrew Clark here, and Andrew Clark, who prepared the survey, will be able to advert to whether or not these are actually on the glass band or on the Michelopolis property. We do know that the boulder wall does encroach onto Matt's property, but according to the tree inventory, they're just not shown. There's no plants that would have been planted onto the Matt's property by the glass bands, unless the
Okay,
glass
this,
band,
I didn't mean,
when
this
they
was,
put the retaining or boulder wall in, also put plants on
this was
property
just a
that they don't
very
own.
simple question regarding the plan and what it denotes. That's it. That was all it was.
Well, it doesn't have shrubs on it, is what you've been told. They're not there.
But the sh-
Okay, so the question is, will the shrubs be removed in order to plant these plants? That's the question.
Are the
I-
shrubs on your property for
No,
sure?
the-
I'm
the
just trying to
shrubs
clarify where they are.
Planted on Mrs. Niss's property with her approval, and they currently sit above our boulder wall. So he shows these arborvitaes going right above our boulder wall, and I just simply wanted to know if he planned on taking out the viburnums and replacing them with these. That was the entire question.
So yeah, I can answer that question again. So as they could remain, they will remain. Without knowing exactly where they are, it's very hard to say one way or the other. So it's possible that some remain
Do
and
you
some are
want them to
removed.
remain, or do you want them gone?
I just wanted a clarification on the plan. That's all I wanted. I simply wanted clarification on the plan.
I'm just trying to find out what you want.
Okay. Well, we can get to what we want later, I guess. Thank you.
Any more questions from the public? Seeing none?
If I could call Alex Doherty to be sworn in to give testimony in this matter.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name, spell your last name.
Sir. Alexander Dougherty, last name is Dougherty.
Thank you, and can you briefly describe your background and experience for the board?
Certainly. I'm a professional planner, BP and AICP. Licenses are current and good standing. My education is at Rutgers Blaustein with a master's in city and regional planning, a concentration in development and redevelopment, certification in public policy. I testify in this capacity on a weekly and daily basis. I'm also the supervising planner for the Township of Dover, executive board committee member for the APA New Jersey. I present the League of Municipalities as well as the State Redevelopment Conference. I'm slated to win the award for Emerging Distinguished Planner just 10 days. I've never not been qualified as a professional planner. I believe I testified before this planning board in Summit about a year ago.
And
Very familiar with the ordinances of the city of Summit?
Yes, I am. I've reviewed the ordinances, the master plan. I reviewed the minutes from the prior hearing, as well as the audio. I reviewed the landscape plan. Pretty much reviewed everything I can get my hands on.
I guess I'm supposed to accept your credentials, so
Thank you.
go ahead and do that first.
And you're familiar with the application, that's currently pending before this board?
I am.
How did you achieve that familiarity?
I reviewed the minutes, the memos from the township, the city professionals. I reviewed the master plan. I've watched the tapes. Everything I pretty much got my hands on, I did for this preparation for this evening.
And have you prepared a report with regard to the application from a planning perspective for consideration by the board?
Yes, I've prepared some outlines in digging into this. I just want to remind the board, though, we're here for one variance, which is related to steep slopes. And I say that because steep slopes, when I was digging into this ordinance, you know, I dug in some depth. I want to just point out to the board, Section 35-16.1 is the steep slopes area requirements. Part A of that act, the purpose and finding of fact. The opening line, the purpose of this article is to provide for a reasonable control of development within the steep slopes area of the city in order to minimize the adverse impact caused by development of such areas, included but not limited to erosion, siltation, flooding, surface water, runoff, pollutant of potable water supplies from point and non-point sources. And it goes in further, point 2, to talk about the Soil Conservation Service of the United States Department of Agriculture, about what 15% slopes are, and the limitations of development. I want to read off a line, the second sentence in here. It is hereby found that the removal of vegetation, disturbance of soil, and the construction of buildings and structures in steep slopes areas of the city may increase surface water, soil soil erosion, siltation, with the result of pollutant of streams, as well as the potential danger of flooding, water drainage, thereby having the potential of endangering public and private property and life. When preparation for this application, listen to the engineer's testimony in great detail. As a planner, this is not a typical variance I would otherwise testify to. It's more of an engineering variance. I would usually testify to use variances, floor area ratio, density, setback, impervious coverage, you know, that height variances, that kind of ordeal. So a steep slopes variance from a planning standpoint is really dependent on the engineer. They set the groundwork, the foundation, as a planner to testify that there would be otherwise no adverse impacts of this nature or caliber. With plenty of prep and discussions with the team at hand and talking with the engineer, personally visiting the site myself with the drone and you know, extensive look at the site and the plans here, from my understanding, a lot of the steep slopes that we're talking about actually don't really amount to much of what is talked about here, but in fact would otherwise reverse some of these issues, stormwater runoff, negative effects on private property, so forth. Because of the regrading opportunity, we don't have to necessarily worry about that water runoff going to a property that would otherwise be lower in grade. We get to kind of retilt that, bring it in-house, as you've heard, 4.5 times the required amount for stormwater management. We get to capture that site runoff. I did prepare an exhibit packet for this evening of some drone shots, and I wanted to just point out, when we talk about some of the other steep slopes, at the corner in the front of the property, otherwise there, if we can get the slide exhibit up. We go, we can keep going. So this was the original condition. This is a Google aerial. If you stay on that slide too, right there. You see it's heavily vegetated. We have that steep slope condition at the corner, at the intersection here. If we can go down to the next slide, please. The current condition of the site as it stands today. We keep going. This is our neighbor adjacent to the left, if you're looking at the property on Ridge Road. As you see, it's pretty flat. There's a small retaining wall there. The next slide, you'll kind of see as well on Fernwood that our neighbors leading up to the property, up to the intersection here, they're also relatively flat. As you saw, the intersection there, historically, that's never been the case. So part of that steep slope disturbance is the ability to provide that, to have that flat surface at the curb line, which I see as a public benefit from a safety standpoint at the intersection. When I was there on a Sunday, I got a good feel for the community, for the neighborhood over here. There's a lot of people walking, you know, jackets, their dogs, that kind of ordeal. So to have the ability to step off, that we see kind of all around the site, but this is that missing middle, I see as a benefit here. Disturbance of that, if you keep going with the slides here, you know, we have retaining walls in the public realm, pretty much in the same general location that this application is discussing. The top two photos here are on Fernwood, just a little further down one of the neighboring properties. The bottom two are past the intersection of Ridge Road on the other side. Bottom left is another retaining wall, kind of at that curb line, and then the bottom right is just a larger retaining wall, a little bit more further in the properties. To kind of have those walls in the public view, in that public realm, is certainly not out of the ordinary. So to have that ability to kind of safe keep that steep slopes, push it in a little bit, flatten an area off on this, along the curb line, I see is more in continuity with some of the immediate neighbors and neighborhood here. Certainly, I think is an added benefit from a safety standpoint, as there is not sidewalks located on this side of Ridge Road, or on our side of Fernwood. And actually, I know there's a lot of leaves down, but I didn't think there was sidewalks on either side of Fernwood on our side of the other property. So if you were to go to the next slide, as you see, it's pretty steep slopes. You really, you know, that's the whole big part of the application is disturbance of this area along. So we have an opportunity here to kind of flatten that. And you saw the landscape plan here. We're on a corner property. We get to really anchor, lock in, accentuate this corner, and kind of tie into the rest of the surrounding properties with that flattening right there along the curb line, which is, again, a disturbance here. As far as adverse effects that we just went through here with the intent and purposes of the steep slopes requirements and regulations, when we talk about Part B of this ordinance 35-16.1, the applicability here, Part 2 of this is development in the proposed area, sleep areas, is to minimize adverse effects associated with the steep slopes. We had talked about Part 3 here, land suitability to accommodate the proposed project without negatively impacting the community health and welfare. I actually see this as a benefit to help the community health and welfare by flattening this area along the intersection here. When we talk about the steep slopes to the rear of the property, we have an opportunity, as I said earlier, to kind of regrade that pitch that would otherwise be going towards our neighbors to the north, bring it more in and capture that stormwater runoff, which would otherwise lead to erosion, soil sediment in that regards, and to plant a very large landscape plan along the perimeter would certainly help to stabilize the earth, the roots, the soil, compact that, and capture anything. When we look at this application holistically, part of this application, we're removing the existing driveway and relocating it on Fernwood. Our immediate neighbor across the street, their driveway is also off of Fernwood. So we have that neighborhood conformity. Having that driveway there as well, driveways are typically curved. We have also the ability to capture water because the driveway does slope in, going up, that otherwise would run off currently in existing condition onto that property. So reviewing this ordinance and understanding this ordinance is more of an engineering ordinance, the negative effects otherwise associated with disturbance of steep slopes, I don't see that here, and I know the engineer testified to that in great detail. With the purposes of this ordinance, I would remind the boards we just heard prior, this is a C2 variance. From a planning standpoint, not that it doesn't have negative effects if it's not done right, this is a lesser tier variance. When I look at the C2, the test here is the benefits of the application as a whole substantially outweigh any detriment. When I look at this application, what we're able to do on this property certainly goes to advancing many purposes of the municipal land use law without really any negative effects at all associated with the disturbance of the steep slopes. In fact, we get to correct what's historically been happening here and any negative effects that would otherwise be associated with the steep slopes to the neighbor to the north. When I look at the benefits, I certainly say we advance purpose A of the municipal land use law, which is to promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. We certainly have advancements of purpose C, provide adequate light, air, and open space. Again, we are here just for steep slopes. We're not here for any other, what we call bulk relief I would argue purpose I for a desirable visual environment, and I would certainly argue purpose M to encourage coordination of various public and private procedures and activities shaping land development with the view of lessening such cost of development for a more efficient use of land. I certainly think when we talk about why we are disturbing the steep slope, from a residential standpoint, one of the things I noticed in my site visit was vast majority of the neighbors have very large backyards. Typically, they have already been disturbed or flattened. And that's typically, you have a family, city of Stumman is very, residential and family-oriented, desirable place to live. To have that ability to enjoy the outdoors and open space in one's property, to raise a family and have that, that's kind of what this gives this property here the ability, while also having the benefits of rectifying any issues. When we look at the C2 variance, the benefits of that variance and the grant of that relief cannot just be felt by the applicant itself. I think this granting of the steep slopes variance here is a benefit to the larger neighborhood, to flatten that on the curve, as well as the immediate neighbors to the north by pitching and regrading and capture any of that stormwater runoff, as well as reassuring that that wall, that retaining wall, with a very large, robust planting and having that root ball there to help absorb any additional water and also to kind of compact that soil. I understand just a moment ago we were talking about the unsightly buffers in that regards. We're not here for a buffer variance. Construction at times is not visually appealing. The long-term effect, as it's outlined in your, I believe your arborist report, is to approve this. The long-term effects here are certainly beneficial. Short-term effects, as you've heard, the applicant will make concessions to otherwise keep that screening up as long as possible. But it's not a variance or negative, if you will, to see your neighbor's house, especially at the house that's being built here. I would argue it is a very beautiful home. With that being said, I believe this application from a C2 standpoint, benefits outweighing the detriments here, have been met, and approval would otherwise be warranted.
Can I just briefly ask, I don't think that we have marked this as an exhibit. A3, please. We'll just do this whole PDF, and thank you.
And you'll send it in?
Yes.
Anything from our professionals?
No.
Mr. Chairman?
Board member?
I'm sorry,
Yes.
I did have one question, I was waiting for her. Regarding, you had mentioned you're correcting current conditions. Can you just clarify what you meant by that, one of the benefits?
Certainly. So I don't want to pretend to be an engineer, but I understand that, and I saw firsthand that the neighboring property is lower in grade. There's no stormwater management controls at the property line. The way the current grading is, we're able to kind of pitch that in towards our dry well system. So certainly any adverse effects that come from water from off this property that kind of throw the neighborhood, we're able to capture that and hopefully stop and prevent and correct would otherwise be existing flow to that neighboring property. From my understanding with talking with the engineer and reviewing prior testimony in the minutes.
I think you also talked about the corner of the property as well?
Certainly. So we have the benefit of flattening that curb line, which is a steep slope disturbance as well, which I think also ties in holistically with the existing properties around us and having the public the ability to step off that street and onto flat land.
Okay, so it's more of improving the sight lines and the area of the right-of-way is what you're referring to?
Certainly, yes.
In that area? Okay. Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Board?
Yeah, could you catch the water without filling in the backyard?
I'm not an engineer. I won't.
Well, you mentioned that it's improving the water conditions, so could you catch, in your opinion, as a planner, since you talked about it, could you catch the water without filling in the backyard with 3 or 4 feet of soil?
That really is an engineering
Yeah,
question.
Okay, let's
I
ask the
think he was
engineer then.
relying on the engineer
Yes. Okay.
and not him. We could ask the engineer.
Is the engineer here?
The engineer's here.
We could recall Mr. Clark.
Just hear me out for a second, and I may be totally off base. The real reason why we're here is because the steep slope in the back was disturbed and the job was stopped, correct?
No, the job was not stopped.
There was no stop work?
Corrected the notice of violation, and at that point, the work continued.
Okay.
And that disturbance wasn't at the back where the trees are. That disturbance was around the
Front.
perimeter of the building.
Okay, thank you.
So, and the reason that the plans went through, again, the review by Mr. Linson, and the plans to mitigate
Mhm.
substantially is to provide a flat rear yard. And it was looked at very closely to see whether or not those trees, that 38 and 36
Right.
inch, could be saved, but
Was that
It's
on the
not.
original plan, when the house was, when the original plans for the house
No.
were submitted? Was the filling of the backyard part of that original
no,
plan?
the original house plan just included just the house. In terms of the future use of the property, it was always believed that the eventual purchaser was going to want to have that flat rear yard. You heard the planner indicate that is one of the characteristics of the area.
Mhm.
And the details associated with that were accelerated because when the contractors drove over the silt fence or took out the stumps, that as a result, they went beyond the 1,000 square feet permitted. I think it was around 500 square feet over in terms of disturbance, but I'm not certain about that number. And as a result, had the notice of violation, which required that we come before the board. But there was no stop work order.
Okay.
And everything that issued that notice of violation has been satisfied,
Okay.
as the board was told and by the planner. So we've done everything we're supposed to have done, and so now it's at the point of saying this home, which has been indicated to be beautiful, consistent with the character of the neighborhood, needs a backyard. And that's where the backyard fills in the soil, and the trees won't survive. The trees that can survive are being survived. I think something like 11 trees,
They're keeping 11 significant.
right? Or 11 being, 11 are being kept. So,
Okay, thank you.
But 60 are
Any other
being removed,
questions?
right? I have a
But
question.
they're also adding 46 or something,
My,
right?
my question is related to basically the leveling of the property. The house that was there previously was essentially single-story from the road. Now it's like 2.5 stories, right? Have you done elevation of the roof line? And is there any chance you need a height variance because now the grade plane is being shifted, especially when you're dropping the front line of the property elevation?
I would.
Have you done those
I
calculations?
would defer that to the, your professionals. I know there are certain ways to measure for the height. I
if I can,
think we're here, there's not a variance yet. It's been
Well, I mean,
clarified.
our professionals haven't actually, when the plan was submitted for the house, it was based on the existing grade plane, and now it's a new grade plane. I'm just saying that we should know the elevation of the roof and whether another variance might be required for the height of the house. I don't know. To me, from the back of the house, it looks very tall. And so when you're leveling it, it sort of actually raises the height of your house versus leaving the front yard higher. So just something for.
the house is permitted. We have a construction permit for that. And at the time that it's finished, there will be an as-built survey associated with that. And at that point, it'll be confirmed. But no, the house is totally permitted. So it meets all of the
Right,
grade
and the house was
elevations.
permitted, sir, correct me if I'm wrong, it was permitted based on the current property elevation. You're changing the elevation, so it changes, I mean, our engineer, I think, could probably, say it's a
I know what you're-
possibility.
I know what you're getting
Yeah.
at, and one of the things that the division of powers is that's the zoning officer that looks at the height. And so I haven't reviewed that at all to be able to know whether there was significant changes.
Well,
Okay.
can we
Yeah, and
make-
we've had a new zoning
Can we make sure
officer.
it is
Yeah.
reviewed before this moves forward?
I would also like to point
We
out
have
that
the
we're
ability to
adding
do
soil,
that.
not taking away, so I
Uh,
don't know how the building would get higher.
Let me get an answer from our attorney, please.
I have a feeling we're not going to be finishing tonight, and we can probably make that request internally to our zoning officer to review that.
That way we would know.
Very good.
And there would be no question, one way or the other.
Well, because soil is being removed from the
No,
front yard.
absolutely, one way or the other. We'll find
Being
out.
added, right?
Any more questions for this particular witness at this time?
Not for me.
Any questions from the public for this witness? Yes, sir. Step forward. Again, your name and. your name.
GLASBAND, 42 Fernwood Road, Summit, New Jersey. I just have one question for you, sir. Regarding, you were speaking about the steep slopes in the front, and how obvious it was from a safety perspective and from an aesthetic perspective that these artificial berms be removed. And the only question I have for you is how come this wasn't done on the front end and a variance wasn't, you guys didn't apply for a variance in order to do that on the front end, as opposed to come here because you're subject of a violation?
I just want
Hang
to
on.
jump in and say, whether they did or didn't consider something in the past, it's irrelevant to the board, so we're not even going to entertain that question, because what we have is the application that is before us today. We are here to weigh in on that application and not on hypothetical
The
other
simple question was
applications or
just why
previous
wouldn't you get a
appointments.
variance on the front end? That's it.
But it's
It
not.
really doesn't matter.
It's not something that
relevant?
we can
Nope.
even consider.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the public? Seeing none, where are we?
At this point, I think that the board member asked for confirmation that the height is consistent with the
Yes.
ordinance. So maybe I'll find that out.
What
And
would
I
be,
also
what would be a
understand-
date to carry this to? 16th of December. We're going to be here for Christmas. 16th of December?
We don't have, which one?
16th?
We can do that.
Okay. Is there a motion to carry this to December 16th without notice and with your permission to waive the board's time to act?
So moved.
Yes.
So moved.
And just noting that the public will have an opportunity to provide their comments on this application at that meeting.
Yep.
Do you need a second?
need a second.
Second.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Did we second? I'll
Yes.
second if we.
Oh, I
okay.
have it from Ms. Zahn.
Okay, you did, okay.
Okay. Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Malay? Ms. Toth?
Yes.
Ms. Chifo?
Yes.
Mr. Chanchuli?
Yes.
Chairman Steiner?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. See you on the 16th.
You can read it now and vote. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I will. Much paper. I also
At this point, I'm going to excuse myself, and you're moving on to 77 West End Avenue. Folks, I have a feeling we're going to 11 tonight.
Yeah. It's okay. These poor people have been here so many times.
Sorry.
So what am I doing? I don't even know.
All right, and before we get started on this one, I am just going to note for the record that we have Mr. Malay and Mr. Yuko both have reviewed the transcripts or the videos of the last hearing. They're eligible to vote at this meeting this evening.
No, sir?
Okay, so,
You're in charge.
all right, so are you already sworn in, or do you
Yes,
have to be
yes.
re-sworn in?
We,
Just-
I believe all the witnesses that are here this evening, and we can double check in my notes, but we're
Yes.
here. You were previously sworn at the last
Yes,
meeting. You
that's
remain under
correct.
oath this evening.
Thank you.
So we
So-
can just begin with,
If you could just state your name again
Yep,
for the record.
it's James Fazzari. This
Thank
is
you.
for 77 West End. We were originally here in September, looking to get bulk variances to put a second floor addition on our house. as well as add a deck and a carport. Was carried to October and to today. There were a lot of questions with regards to water management and grading. So we hired Michael Lanzafama, who's here, from Casey and Keller, in order to do a whole analysis on that, and he's going to present that analysis. We also have Jim Ramtol from GRA Architects, in case there are any questions with regards to the architecture plan.
Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please.
My name is Michael Lanzafama. That's Lanzafama. I'm a licensed professional engineer, land surveyor and planner, licensed in the state of New Jersey. I've been licensed since 1984. I've testified before this board and the planning board and other boards throughout the state on numerous occasions. My licenses are current, and I'll be happy to proceed if you'd like.
I imagine we would like to accept his credentials once again.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. We didn't bring anything on, I didn't bring my laptop. I didn't realize that that was the way to go these days. I'll do analog. We were engaged by James and his wife, Ryan, to take a look at the project from a flood hazard perspective and also a stormwater management perspective. Early on in the process, I did an analysis of the site from a flood hazard perspective. We looked at various methods of determining what the flood hazard elevation on the property would be and how that would dictate how this property should be developed. Their original plan had called for a much bigger expansion to the house as well as an enclosed garage, which once we did our analysis and realized that the new flood hazard regulations had significant impact on this property, it was determined that we kind of dial that back, take a look at the flood hazard regulations, and then apply them appropriately. And that was the impetus for us developing a plan that had a carport as well as the location of the carport on the property. The overall plan that we had analyzed, or the information we utilized to analyze and determine what the flood hazard design elevation would be, was from published data from FEMA. We looked at a number of properties along West End Avenue and determined what those flood hazard elevations were that were established by FEMA. We then applied that. We did a proportional analysis where we determined where our property was relative to properties downstream and upstream from us. We determined that the flood hazard design elevation, based upon that FEMA data, was elevation 273.3. However, as of July of last year, it was determined by the state of New Jersey that to determine a flood hazard design elevation that a property to be developed would be subject to, we had to add 3 feet to that. So our design elevation becomes 276.3. And as you can see from the topography that was submitted, that puts the flood hazard elevation somewhere around midway across the house. So it would impact significantly the back end of the property. So what we had determined, that we looked at what they call permits by rules. There's a number of permit by rules that are permissible under the DEP regulations, and we submitted a letter to the board that indicated that there are 3 different permit by rules that were applicable to the property. One includes the construction of the deck, the installation of the shed at the rear of the driveway area, and the other is the construction of the carport. This allows for a covered area for their vehicles, and yet still complies with the DEP regulations. From a stormwater management perspective, we determined that the increase in the impervious area for the site is about 611 square feet. This equates to just over 220 cubic feet of additional runoff for the 100-year storm event. And what we're proposing to do is provide a combination of an interceptor trench and an underground storage system. If you look at the plan at the rear of the driveway, there's a stone trench that's proposed with a dashed line indicating a 4-inch perforated pipe. This should be on the Casey and Keller plans that were submitted. I believe it's sheet number 2 and has a revision date, I believe, of 11/11/24. That should be a Casey and Keller drawing, sheet number 2. Yeah, the first page is the existing condition survey we prepared, and the second page is the grading, drainage, and erosion control plan. So if you look at the end of the driveway, you'll see that we've proposed a gravel trench that would intercept the sheet flow that normally comes off that driveway uncontrolled and flows directly into the stream. This would pick up that water, that surface flow, filter it out, and then direct it to a 24-inch diameter pipe that's set in a stone trench 6 feet wide by 25 feet long. This provides for adequate storage for that 100-year event. What we've also provided is a catch basin at the very downstream portion of that system. So should the system get overloaded, should there be a storm event that's even greater than the 9.2 inches expected in the 100-year event, it would bubble out of that inlet and flow directly to the stream. We did have a conversation with the board engineer. We did get the latest review memo that was issued today for the review of our overall design. And we've agreed to install some decorative gravel, a Delaware River gravel, around that inlet, and that would prevent any erosion that might occur should that system overflow. The roof drains from the existing house, as well as the proposed house, the second floor addition, would be directed to the catch basin at the back corner of the driveway area, and that would discharge into an existing 4-inch pipe that is already in place. So there's no new pipe being installed into the stream. We're utilizing an existing pipe. So I believe that the project can be permitted totally by permits by rule, that no additional DEP permitting is required for the design concept we have before you. And just to reinforce what Mr. Ramenthal had testified to regarding the side yard setback variances, the location of the carport, and as much as it adds to the request for variance, what's being driven here is the location of the structures are predicated upon the fact that the site is impacted by a stream that runs through the middle of the site, and it's also subject to the location of a lawfully existing structure. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have with regard to our design and anything I've testified to.
Is the carport attached? Oh, sorry, no, our
Yes, the
professionals have
carport
to
is
ask.
attached to the house.
It was hard to tell in the picture, sorry, but I guess questions from our professionals, right?
Sure. Well, why don't we answer that question first? Is the carport attached to the
Yes,
house?
the carport is attached.
Is that good? Do you have gutters on the carport, or are they?
The roof system from the carport would discharge into the collection system.
Okay. We spoke earlier today about some of the, some questions I had about the drainage and the water collection. As he said, we agreed to add some stone around the overflow in the event that it does become overloaded, then it's not eroding any of the backyard from a point source. So I reviewed the calculations. I don't take any exception to what was designed on there. That's all I had.
I have a couple of questions. I'm a little confused by this whole thing because earlier you had mentioned the property being in a flood zone, but this property has been removed from the flood zone.
It has not. They have a Loma.
They have the letter of map amendment only takes the house out of the flood zone.
Okay, but that's where we're talking about where the house is.
Well,
So
you're
the house
talking
and the
about the
carport,
area-
That's all not in the flood zone.
The area where the carport is in the flood zone. When FEMA takes an element of your property out of the flood zone, they're very specific. And I believe the Loma that they received some time ago, and remember, that was before the state added 3 feet to the flood elevation, that I believe it only stated the structure was removed. I don't know if I have a copy.
Yes.
I know, and first we'll see if our planner has any questions, then we'll go back
Thank
to.
you. Just a question regarding, you had identified the side yard variance that's being proposed and also the conditions of the property. This would lead more to a C1 review because of the exceptional practical difficulties of the property?
Yes, that was my thought.
Okay. Thank you.
No further questions, just want to clarify that issue. Questions from the board?
Yeah, so if the other part of the property is in the flood zone where the carport is going, if you're able to disturb that area for the carport, why can't you disturb that area to put the garage?
Because then you would have to secure what's called an individual flood hazard permit from the state of New Jersey, which is a very costly and time-consuming venture. Part of the issue at hand is that the state would probably want us to do a more detailed analysis of the stream corridor, where you have to do hydraulic modeling, which would take us literally months to do, as well as the structure itself would have to have flood vents so that waters could move freely between it, in and out of it. And the idea and the concept of the carport seemed to make a lot more sense from a flood hazard perspective.
Are there any other questions from the board? I have one, and I'm not sure if I'm just missing a drawing, but is there a current drawing that shows how the carport is attached to the house?
I believe it's on the architectural plans.
Okay, maybe I just
There should
didn't
be,
find it on
I
my.
think, if you look at the elevations, I believe you see how the connection occurs.
Okay. And then, any questions from the public? Seeing none, you want to call the next witness? Is that,
I think that's it.
yeah. Oh, I thought the architect is,
I can summarize what was presented at the last meeting if there's any questions.
I think maybe just go over the changes to the plan, since I think the carport was not attached the last time you were here, and now it's attached, so.
It actually was attached, I just don't think it was very clear.
Oh, okay.
Oh, here.
It's like- So go back to the other drawing. Sorry. This is the. It doesn't actually look attached.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't, because it does not look attached on our photos, on the plan that I'm looking at.
Sheet A4.1, whether it was the original or the revised should definitely show it, and I'll be happy to walk over to the graphic to demonstrate that. Yes.
Oh, yes, yeah, yeah, 4.1.
Just confirm that for the board.
What is that?
Here we are.
The latest date should be revision J, dated 11/11/24. In the upper right-hand corner of the drawing. I'm not sure, I could almost see the drawing you have, I'm not sure you have
I don't
the
think that's the one I
most
have.
recent one. There should be copies
Yeah.
distributed.
You saying A4.1?
Oh,
Well,
Yeah.
Revision
A4.1,
J,
yes.
11.
Showing the rear elevation.
I don't know what J is.
J is the revision number.
J is the revision, the upper right-hand corner of each drawing. The lower
I
right
don't think,
is what is the name of the drawing, the number of the drawing. A4.1. There's A4 and A4.1.
It should be in this pack. The last page.
but that's 1111?
From the rear.
The 1011. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Wait, is this the 1011?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay.
Here. See? It's attached.
Yeah, okay, I see. There's that one.
I'm going to walk over to the drawing if you don't mind
Yeah,
to
you might want to.
demonstrate that just so we can see.
Yeah.
Can you take your microphone?
Yeah.
Turn it on.
You have to turn it on.
Yeah, I'm referring to the A4.1 drawing, lower right. The carport, as you can see in the rear elevation, has two piers on either side, and there's a shaded area here that actually attaches to the house. And that part of the carport roof also covers the stairs that go up to the porch that wraps around to the front of the house. It's not as visible, it's shaded, it's maybe not as easily determined, but in fact, it will be connected, and it is connected, and always has been connected. Because that was a comment that I think the zoning officer made, and once I demonstrated that, I think that was successfully responded to. Any other questions?
Any questions from the professionals?
No.
No questions. Thank you.
I guess I do have a quick one. Are we down now with the revised plans to just 2 variances that you're seeking? Right side yard setback?
Yes,
and
actually,
total
that is
setback?
correct. Assuming that the front yard setback is not changing, so if you wanted to add that as a third, because what we are doing is we are expanding to a second story, and let's get to my front sheet here. In my zoning data sheet here in the lower right-hand corner of the T1 sheet, you'll see 2 variances, and then I have the number 1, which is a pre-existing non-conforming use. So if the board feels that that should be identified as a variance, they can, but that's the way we presented it, yes. There's a side yard setback variance, and there is a side yard and total side yard. So they're both side yard variances. One is the individual side yard on the right side, since the carport is obviously encroaches into that side yard, and then the overall side yard also is part of the variance.
And let me just confirm the figures that we're talking about here. Side yard setback is proposed at 8.92 feet.
That is correct?
Minimum side yard total is 22 feet.
22, yes.
And then the front yard setback, because I know it was previously identified there as a variance, is 29.71 feet.
29.71, that's correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions from?
Yeah,
board?
I had 2, one of which was just answered. The second question, the carport, just to make sure I understand. So the carport, it's attached to the house, but the other 3, quote, walls are open.
Yes, that's all open.
There are no walls.
It's open on actually all 4 sides. It's the roof, the connection is really the roof of the carport itself, because carports are prohibited in Summit as an individual structure. And we made sure that when we designed it, it was going to be connected to the home.
So the roof is attached, so you can get in and out without the
Correct.
exposed elements, but the other, I think it was the other 3 sides are all wide
All
open.
3 sides are all open,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
I have a couple questions. So since where the carport is located in a flood zone, and maybe this isn't your area, maybe it's the other gentleman's area, are there not requirements set out that if you want to build a structure in that zone, you can do so, but you have to meet certain requirements? So in other words, if this is, let's say this is
This
In
is
A-
the permit by rule requirements that he, or, yeah,
I read those.
yes.
So my question is, isn't there a way for you to construct the garage meeting the requirements, not the permit by rules, but normal building requirements, as long as it's part of that flood zone? So in other words, if the flood zone says you can build a structure, but you need breakaway walls and flood vents, is that a requirement is that something you could do in this flood zone?
Yes, I believe one of the other gentlemen asked me a similar question. And yes, the problem is the length of time to secure such a permit and the cost. The cost is very, very prohibitive because you don't have a detailed flood study for this particular section of the stream corridor. So we would have to do a detailed flood analysis that would literally take us 2 or 3 months just to develop the model. That would be the basis for which to determine which individual permit we would need. Then the structure itself would have to be able to allow floodwaters to move freely through it. So you'd have flood vents all around the perimeter of the structure. So to answer your question, yes, it could be done.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right.
Maybe I'm asking it the wrong way. Isn't there, so it's in a flood zone. Do you know what flood zone it's in? Like, is it an AE, is it A, is it Z, is it?
It's A, it's an A zone.
So aren't there requirements already established in the A zone?
Yes.
For building?
Yes, well,
So
the term,
is it-
it's based upon the actual flood elevation.
Correct.
So the flood elevation that existed at this property 3 years ago was 3 feet lower than it is today under the new DEP regulations. And that additional 3 feet causes us a significant hardship. And that's why the carport allows us to secure a permit by rule, because it allows floodwaters to move freely through it. And the carport attached to the house, I don't want to get into the architecture, but as you know, many of the old houses in Summit had these porte-cocheres where they ride their carriages through that area. It's going to look very similar to that.
Right. So, just bear with me.
Sure,
I'm asking
take
the
your
next
time.
question. So, my experience with flood zones is I've built a house down shore. And I'm
Okay.
in an AE zone.
Okay.
So all my living area has to be above a certain height.
1 foot above,
So since this is not a living area,
correct,
it's a garage,
right.
couldn't you construct the garage with breakaway walls, so to provide them with some security, get their car out of sight and maybe put stuff inside? Or is that not allowed?
We wouldn't do breakaway walls. We either have to have the walls elevated 1 foot above the flood elevation all the way around. That would be permissible, or flood vents located all
Yeah.
the way around.
And flood vents, I mean,
You don't need them all the way around, you just need.
No,
Really
there's a specific standard.
Correct,
It's
yeah.
based upon the
Some
square
square feet
footage.
and all that
It's
stuff.
1 square inch per square foot of interior space in the form of flood vents.
the only reason I'm asking this question is, I love my garage. So if I could get you a garage, I'll get you a garage. But my point is, if you could build with the flood vents, with breakaway walls, at least it offers some resemblance of a garage, a place to keep bicycles and things like that. Granted, if your yard floods, because your house is not in a flood zone, but the garage is, your house is gonna flood. Because the water's not gonna go, oh, can't go over there, right? So my point is my question is there a way for them to do that without doing that 3-month study?
No.
No? Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Any questions from the public? No? So, yeah, seeing none, now we see if there are any comments from the public, correct? Any comments from the public? No. Okay, so then we will go into our executive session, our discussion here. Does anybody want to start?
Do you want to hear condition?
Oh,
first?
conditions,
Yeah, I
yeah.
was going to ask.
All right.
Good.
So we have 3 that were discussed all at the last hearing. First is compliance with those conditions noted in the board engineer's memorandum. Second is that the applicant shall submit a grading permit to the city engineer for review and approval, although, Marie, that's still required here?
Yes.
And then,
Can you say that again? Yes,
Applicant shall submit a grading plan to the city engineer for review and approval.
That's what, yes, I still have that. in there.
Okay. And then the third was that the applicant shall submit a drainage plan to the board engineer for review and approval. Is,
That was already done.
we're
So that's-
satisfied with what's been submitted,
Right.
and so that one is no longer necessary, so we only have two conditions then. And so, as to the variances, they're looking all for C variances. We do have a full 7 members here, so 4 votes are required to approve.
All right, who would
I-
like to start?
I'd like to say, so just wait, just back to the, it's C1, right? Proof of hardship?
It's a C variance, and they're arguing that they're entitled to the grant of the variance under C1 because of the hardship on the property, yes.
Okay. So, I don't know if this is defined right, but my whole issue with the application is everything's fine except for the carport. I mean, there's a reason why we don't have, where they're not allowed in Summit, except for the historic ones. That's my one concern. The proof of hardship, I mean, it says, is it against public good? I don't know if this really works this way, but I do think they're unsightly. So that does affect the public. If the public has to see, just the carport, just the roof, then I think it does affect the public. And that's my concern. It's just, we don't allow carports. I don't think we should allow the carports. But the rest of the application, I'm fine with.
And I do just want to clarify, because I know we had a carport variance previously noted here. It's no longer technically required, because what they're proposing is attached to the principal structure. And our code prohibits carports as an accessory structure, meaning standalone and separate from the principal use. So they no longer require a variance for the fact that this is proposed as a carport attached to the principal structure. The variances that we're focused on here are the 3 that we discussed, the front yard setback, the side yard setback, and the total side yard.
I can give it a shot. You win the prize for the toughest property. I really feel for you, and I'm sorry this has taken as long as it has. I think, given the significant restrictions you've got, your team of professionals came up with as elegant as a solution as is going to exist. When it comes to the specific variances you're requesting, the front yard variance is an existing non-conforming, it's there. Adding a second floor does not exacerbate that variance, it just keeps it the way it is. As for the side yard variances, I note that the neighbors' driveways are on your side of the property on each side, so you've got that additional buffer from them. It's not as though their houses are as close to your property as they're allowed to be. So that I think that buffering helps offset some of the closeness you are to the property line. And I certainly can support this variance, and just thank you for your patience. You're looking at me like I'm missing something, Andy.
Just listening intently.
Okay. I'm trying to hit the high points.
Any other comments from the board?
Yeah, I can support this application. I know the existing conditions, they exist, so there's nothing you can do about them. I can support the application. I would just like to make a comment that I would pursue whatever you could to enclose the garage, because that's my man cave. So I know you need a garage, so, but look into it, but I can support the application as it is.
Yeah, and I can support it as well for all the reasons Claire stated and others have stated. This is almost a definition of a hardship lot. I mean, sometimes we have people pushing questionable hardships, but this is a classic example of hardships. I can support it as well.
Is that it? Okay. feel, should we, time to vote, right?
Move to a vote?
Anything else to say?
Make a
Yes.
motion, we move this for a vote.
Second?
Yeah.
Motion to approve.
Mr. Yuko,
Yes.
Mr. Nelson,
Yes.
Ms. Zahn,
Yes.
Mr. Malay,
Yes.
Ms. Toth,
Yes.
Ms. Chieffo,
Yes.
Mr. Chanchuli.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Can I just clarify? Was that a motion to approve?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't quite hear.
It was a little fuzzy.
Quite hear approve.
The way Mr. Nelson,
Just
it was
wanted
a
to
little
clarify
fuzzy.
that. It's late.
So next we have a resolution for memorialization.
We're still going.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a resolution, right?
Yes, all right, so I will start. So we have a resolution, it's 30 Wallace Road, Block 901, thank
Is this
you.
your pen?
Block 901, Lot 1.
If everyone in the public could just please keep it down, we're trying to conclude.
Folks, we're still in session.
So we're talking about ZB-24-2253. That's Canoe Brook Country Club. So this is the application, so I know that the application was for fuel tank storage and for the staff housing, but it was only voted on for the fuel tank storage, so that was the one that passed. The eligible voting members are Chairman Steiner, Mr. Yuko, Mr. Nelson, Ms. Zahn, Mr. Malay, Mr. Curran, and Mr. Chanchuli. Can we have a motion?
So moved.
I don't know who to take.
know if
Okay,
you want that or not.
so I'm gonna
It's
take
yours.
Ms. Zahn and then second, Mr. Malay. Chairman Steiner,
Yes.
Mr. Yuko.
Yes.
Mr. Nelson,
Yes.
Ms. Zahn,
Yes.
Mr. Malay. Mr. Chanchuli.
Yes.
The motion carries.
I believe we have a resolution to go into closed session.
Well, first
Oh,
we
you want to
could,
do dates
we'll
first?
do, yeah, we'll do the calendar first because that doesn't have to be in a closed session. So I hope everyone had a chance to look over the potential meeting dates for 2025. I made some notes as to why, wait, hold on. All right, as to why I chose some of the off dates. So, if you'll notice, like June 9th, there's a council meeting, and then I had to accommodate for graduations. September 4th was one of the other off dates, because council had taken our date, I believe. And then I tried to schedule in November around the League of Municipalities. I wanted to discuss, having the August meeting. I don't know if you wanted to do 2 meetings in August, or if we were just gonna stick with 1, or just schedule both and then decide later. I don't know how you wanna work it. Anyway.
One. If we schedule both, we're gonna have.
I know, you're right, and I was thinking the same thing, because I know myself, and I would see it, and I would just schedule.
Everything will get carried to that one in August.
If we
So,
can cancel it, we'll cancel it, but, you know.
Well, so so Miriam is saying to
No.
not.
I'm saying
No
one,
meeting.
yeah.
Yeah,
Just one meeting in August.
yeah, okay.
And
I agree with that.
you can always reconsider and add it back on at some point
Right.
closer if the schedule backs up and you feel the
Yeah.
need to add it.
But
Council
hopefully-
takes the whole month of August off.
I know.
Let's do
Well,
that.
we work
Do you
harder.
want to take the whole month?
Claire will be on
I
vacation.
wouldn't mind taking the whole month off. Okay, so can we vote on that then? I believe,
Sure,
are we
why
okay
not?
with it?
I have a question. Can we put restrictions on, like, I mean, you know how some people here, like 4, 5 weeks, we can't restrict on how much time they have to give their whole presentation? Or,
That has nothing to do with the calendar. Let's finish the calendar first.
no, yes, it does, because if, the reason why we have an extra week, you know, where we keep adding days in
I
December
don't
is
think you can
because-
stop them.
No, you can't.
Oh, okay.
Because, I mean, a lot of that is prompted by questions from the board members, and you can't delineate, you know, a cutoff point for an applicant. No, it's not
Okay, so they can
feasible,
bring as many professionals and,
as they
okay.
feel necessary to
Yeah.
present their application, yes.
okay,
Absolutely.
I was just trying.
Sorry.
This is where I should mention the 18 or 19 hearings we had on Overlook Hospital about 15 years ago, so yeah.
Okay.
It can go on
All
forever.
right.
So moved.
So, okay. And a second?
I'll second that.
Okay.
And you'll send out the completed date list.
Yes, I will send out the official formalized list. Okay, so let's do a roll call vote then. Chairman Steiner?
Yes.
Mr. Yuko?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Ms. Zahn?
Yes.
Mr. Malay?
Yes.
Ms. Toth?
I'm
Oh,
not voting.
Oh, yes, you're right. Okay, sorry, forgot. Ms. Chifo?
Yes.
And Mr. Chantuli?
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries. So next, we just have some amended dates from the calendar that was previously adopted. Even though these dates are included in 2025 anyway, we would still have to amend them though, right? Because these are actually included in this calendar that we just approved, but these
Then
are being
that's-
changed.
That's fine.
Oh, then I don't have to do anything? Okay.
Yeah.
They're all
If we,
done.
if we just approved all the amended dates.
Yes, we did. Yep, I have, so what was noted was January 8th. We had to change, excuse me, the reorg meeting from January 6th to the 8th, and then the February meeting, February 19th to the 20th. And yes, they are on this list, so then I guess we're okay.
That's fine.
Good. Okay.
Okay. Now we're going to go into close.
Yes.
Thank you to the professionals.
Thank you, and have a good evening.
That, I think, includes you.
Yes, it does.
There is a resolution. Would you please read it?
Oh, wait, hold on. Jay is asking me something. Okay.
You might
Just letting him know we're in closed session.
There will be no further business after. We'll close the meeting after that. And
But
at
does this
that point,
resolution
would,
have to be
the
on
TV folks can
Okay,
turn
wait,
us off.
so, wait, let me just. Sorry, I'm just telling him, he was turning off the audio, but we need it on right now. Okay. So, do you want me to read it?
You have the resolution, yeah.
Okay. So this is the resolution for the closed session. The date of adoption is today, December 2nd, 2024. Whereas NJSA 10:4-13 of the Open Public Meeting Act permits the exclusion of the public from meetings of public bodies in certain circumstances, which are set forth in NJSA 10:4-12B. And whereas the Zoning Board of Adjustment of the City of Summit is of the opinion that such circumstances currently exist, now therefore be it resolved by the Zoning Board of Adjustment, the City of Summit as follows. The public shall be excluded from the discussion of any action upon the hereinafter specified matters. The nature of the subject matter to be discussed is as follows: contract negotiations, professional appointments. It is anticipated at this time the above stated subject matter will be made public in approximately 30 days or at such time as any litigation discussed is resolved. Okay, now let me just ask for audio to be off, and then we can proceed.